Here, thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. I have one proposed change on our agenda to take the item 7A, lot division for 5100 Mirror Lakes Drive, and move it up in front of the public hearings in section 6. Are there any other changes to the agenda from the Commission? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the amended agenda.
So moved.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Next item is approval of the consent agenda. The only item on the consent agenda this evening is the minutes of the regular meeting of the Planning Commission on August 28th, 2013. Any comments, corrections, additions, modifications to those minutes? Hearing none, I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, so the consent agenda has been approved. Next up is the community comment portion of the meeting. This is the portion of the meeting where we invite comment from members of the community on topics that are not on this evening's agenda. We ask that you come up and identify your name and address and come to one of the side podiums and limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to come up and address the Commission during community comment? Seeing none, I would take a motion to close community comment.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, so community comment is closed. Next item on the amended agenda is item 7A, lot division for 5100 Mirror Lakes Drive, Interlaken Country Club. Carrie, you're going to introduce this for us?
Oops. Okay, thank you, Chair. Members of the Commission, before you is a request for a lot division. The title is a little misleading in that with lot divisions, it's not dividing a property, it's simply shifting a lot line, not creating a new lot. Nonetheless, our ordinance defines that as a lot division. The property that we're looking at is 5100 Mirror Lakes, and it's also a portion of the Interlaken Country Club. So this is a highlighted area of the site just south of Interlaken Boulevard. It's adjacent to the golf course here. So this is the subject property and some adjacent property to the Interlaken Golf Club. Prior to the applicant owning the property, the previous property owner installed a swimming pool that actually encroached onto the golf course property. This survey shows it a little better. You can see the pool coming in here. There's some landscaping and also a fence located right here that encroaches onto the country club site. So as you see, it's kind of a wooded area from the golf course. So what the applicant is proposing is to simply shift that lot line to run along the fence line. And the applicant has worked with the country club to obtain that property. So the action before you is simply reestablishing that lot line. Again, we're not creating a new lot, just simply shifting that lot line to accommodate what has in the past, essentially in practice, that fence line has been the property line. So with that, staff is recommending approval of the lot division as requested by the applicant.
And Carrie, just so I'm clear, the applicant and the neighboring property owner have reached some mutually satisfactory arrangement about the exchange of property?
Correct.
Okay. Other questions for Carrie? This is not a public hearing other than the other unlike the other items that we have on our agenda this evening, so we can move directly to discussion of this item. Is there any discussion from the Planning Commission? If there's no discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. The next portion of our agenda is the public hearing portion of the agenda. We have 4 items on the agenda, but I want to let folks in the audience know that one of the items, item 6D, preliminary plat for Ridge Creek at 5820 Brookview Avenue, has been continued to our next meeting on September 25th. So if you're here waiting to comment on that item, you will be waiting a long time. So come back on the 25th on that item. So the first item up on our public hearings is a variance for Casey Holly at 5616 Woodcrest Drive in Edina. Chris, you're going to introduce this?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, this is a request at 5616 Woodcrest Drive. The property is located on the west side of Woodcrest, as highlighted. It backs up to a pond. The current home was built in 1969. It's a 2-story home with a 2-car garage. It is in the 500-year flood zone, but it is not within the 100-year flood zone. From what you can see from the existing survey, there's a line that bisects the home, which is the required 50-foot setback from the pond. The home was built in 1969 with a 23-foot setback from the pond. The home predates our current ordinance. Prior to the 50-foot setback, the requirement was 25 feet, and I quite honestly don't know what the rules were back in 1969. There's no evidence that there was a variance granted to locate the original house where it is. Also, it's non-conforming in terms of lot coverage. Currently, the ordinance requires that the lot area is only that area that is upland from the edge of the pond. So the total lot area does not include the area that's below the water line. So what the result of that is that the house is over on the lot coverage requirement, so they really can't add anything to the footprint of the house. Here's a photograph of how the home looks currently. What they would like to do is just add 2 bedrooms on to the north side of the house that is not as close to the street but closer to the back wall. It would match the back wall of the home. This is what the improvement would look like from the street with the added second floor, 2 bedrooms. The house actually won't be any taller. There'd be very little difference from any angle looking at it. This is an existing elevation photo of the home, and then also with the addition of the bedrooms above. They had looked at the possibility of perhaps adding a second floor area above the front portion of the house that's towards the north. However, they have vaulted ceilings, both in a great room area and also in their dining room area, and they wanted to make sure that they were able to retain that feature. It would also require a variance there anyway because the 50-foot setback is so deep into the lot. This is the corner of the home where the second floor will match the back wall of the house. It will go straight up and then match the roof line of the existing second floor that's there. It would come out to the back wall at that 23-foot setback. It won't get any closer to the pond. It will not get any closer to the north lot line. It meets all of the setback requirements with the exception of that setback from the pond, which is an existing non-conforming situation. The area that's highlighted in red is actually the area that is the 50-foot setback from the pond that should be a non-buildable area. If you take that into consideration with the front yard setback, it's an unbuildable lot. The conditions wouldn't allow for a tear-down rebuild without the benefit of a variance. This again are elevations of the existing home as it looks today. Existing lower level floor, the main floor. And again, here's the area where they have the vaulted ceilings, which also doesn't really correspond well with the floor plan. Instead, they would like to then match that back wall on the second floor with the same height. This then are the new elevations from the street, also from the back. Again, this does meet the side setback, match the heights. It will be in an area that currently has a flat roof. Staff does believe there's certainly challenges to adding on to the property. Really, their only alternative would be to add on to the second floor. They can't add on to the footprint. Staff does believe it's a reasonable request and supports it. Staff would condition any approval on the survey date stamped August 23, 2013, the building plans and elevations that were before you this evening that are date stamped August 23, 2013. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Ms. Ocker? Commissioner Platter.
So, Chris, I drove by there the other day, and there's a fair amount of construction activity going on. Do you know, have they started the addition we're speaking of, or is that something else?
They can certainly get a demolition permit without having to, I mean, they can work on the inside of the house and get a demolition permit and do some remodeling. And that's, I believe, also part of this project. But as far as they don't have a permit to add on that portion that requires a variance.
I was just checking if they started work and
No.
something.
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other questions for Chris? Seeing none, is the applicant here? Do you want to come up and introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the project?
My name is Casey Holly. This is my wife, Carissa.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we purchased the home 2 years ago and did not know of the setback variance. So we learned of that. We hired an architect because we did not want to lose the preservation of the house. And that's when we discovered about the variance. I think Chris did an excellent job of describing our situation. And yes, we have started the process right now, but we're doing, and then we're also changing the front entryway, which we have permits.
Any questions for Commissioner Potts?
Does this addition require any foundation work for that second story?
It does not.
Okay, thank you.
And you're staying within the current footprint?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for the Hollies? Commissioner Grable.
Sort of a general question, and it goes beyond just this property. One of the things that the commission relies on are the drawings and the pictures, if people present pictures of a project so that we can get some idea of what it covers. And I'm wondering, your pictures show the front of the house and how the front of the house would look with the new addition, but the big change is going to be in the back. And why don't you have a picture showing what it's going to look like from the back, because that's where the significant change is going to be.
We don't have a photograph, but we do have the drawing.
I understand that, but
Okay.
somebody went through and did the pictures of the front with the change,
Yes.
Yeah,
and nobody did anything with the back where the real change is going to be, and I'm just wondering.
that was our architect. He put this all together,
Okay.
so I'm not certain. I think
Okay.
he thought the drawing did more justice.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Platter.
Has there been any concerns from the neighbors? Have you approached them? It would seem a lot of it would be from the back, across the pond and things. What have you done to speak to them, and what have you come back with?
We have several friends on the pond, and they've all been supportive. I believe some of our neighbors may be here tonight.
Okay.
Not sure. They were at the beginning anyway. And they've been complimentary so far of the work.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Carrie or Chris, in terms of work that goes on within this 50-foot setback when you're next to a water body like this, are there precautions that are taken during the construction process that protect the water from, the inevitable spin-off from construction?
We do have silt fence requirements.
So that'd be part of the building
Yes.
permit and the enforcement of the building
Yes.
permit to ensure that we don't have a whole bunch of fill sliding into the lake. Okay. This is a public hearing, and so at this time I would open the public hearing and ask anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this particular application to come forward to one of the podiums, introduce yourself, and share your thoughts about the project. Apparently your project is not of as great an interest as others on our agenda. Lucky you. Seeing no appetite for comment, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing. And a second. Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, discussion by the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Potts.
taking a look at the aerial photographs, it looks like this house is similar to every other one around this lake or pond in terms of how close it is relative to that setback. And due to the fact that they're building on top of the existing structure, not needing to do any new foundation work, it seems like a reasonable proposal. So I'm inclined to support this.
Other comments? Commissioner Fisher.
Mr. Chair, I would concur with Commissioner Potts, and I would say, that the hardship here is pretty clear. I mean, there's no amount of addition they can do on really 3/4 of this house that wouldn't require variance, and the fact that they're essentially they're proposing an addition that would not encroach even a ½ inch on already non-conforming situation. So I think it's really it's an easy decision for me, and I'll just, if it's all right, I'll just make the motion.
Please do.
All right. I'll make a motion that we approve the variance request based on the staff recommendation and include my notes about the hardship, if you would, Jackie.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Congratulations, you have your variance. Next up on the agenda is item 6B, preliminary plat, Scott Busen, 6609 Blackfoot Pass in Edina. Carrie, you'll introduce this for us?
I will. Thank you, Chair. Members of the Commission. This is a preliminary plat. It also includes a front yard setback variance for one of the lots. So again, it's 6609 Blackfoot Pass. This is located in the Indian Hills area on Cheyenne Trail and Blackfoot Pass. So look at the property as it relates to some of the other lots within the neighborhood. There's an existing single-family home, kind of sits high on the site up here. The site is heavily wooded, and there's some slopes to the site, as we'll see in a minute. Closer view of the site. The applicant is proposing to tear down that single-family home that we saw, and they would build two new homes. One on the this is where the existing home sits, so the building pad for proposed Lot 1 would essentially be that same area. And then Lot 2, the house would be to the south. As with all of our minimum lot areas as they're established in Edina, it's based on the median width, lot area, and lot depth of all properties within 500 feet. Area that's not included in lot area would be areas below the ordinary high water elevation of lakes. So you'll see some properties here to the south that were actually platted out into the lake. That acreage is not calculated within this median calculation of all the lots within 500 feet. So I just want to make note of that. There's been some confusion, I think, from some of the neighborhood as to whether that area should be included or not. Our ordinance is very clear that that area is not included. So it was not included in the calculation that was done by the applicant. So the way the medians have shaken out here in that 500-foot area, The minimum lot area is just over 27,000 square feet. The minimum lot width, 146 feet, and depth, 183. Both of the proposed lots, as indicated here on the screen, exceed our minimum standard. So what we have before us is a plat that conforms to the city's regulations for lot size. So the request before the Planning Commission is a subdivision, the preliminary plat, to create 2 lots out of the 1 existing, and a front yard setback variance for that south lot from 100 feet to 45 feet for lot 2. And the way our front yard setback requirement is established, it's based on the home on either side. This is a corner lot. As you see, Blackfoot Pass and Cheyenne Trail meet. So essentially, lot 2 here is a corner lot where those 2 streets intersect. So the front yard setback that's established for both of these lots is based on the lot adjacent to it. So the setback of the home to the south is just over 100 feet, and to the north is 60 feet. Now the proposed home here on the north lot meets that requirement. What the applicant is proposing is, rather than build within the buildable area, the graphic on the screen indicates building pads that would be allowed by our setback requirements. So rather than build this south lot within this steep slope area, you can get a sense for the slopes that are located on the site through here. There's also some mature oak trees located in this area. So rather than building into that slope and into this oak stand, the applicant is proposing a building pad out into this more level area where the trees aren't as high quality as those oaks. So that's the reason for the variance that's before you. So you see they're proposing here a 45-foot setback both from Blackfoot Pass and Cheyenne. So the primary issue here is the proposed plat with that front yard setback variance reasonable for the site. In this instance, staff believes that it is. First, again, the applicant has a plat here that conforms to our minimum lot size requirements. So more or less they would be entitled to that subdivision. The building pads here have been proposed in such a way as to do the least amount of, have the least amount of impact on the site. Again, they're using the existing building pad for the northern lot, and they would utilize the existing drive as it comes through here. And then again, the building pad proposed for the south lot in a more flat area so as not to disturb those slopes. Another reason for bringing it up front is the applicant would like to, locate the house farther away from the house to the south. As you see, it's set quite a bit back in this location here. So bringing it out to the street, the home becomes further away from that property. So in regard to the variance criteria, staff believes that the variance criteria is also met. So this is the criteria that we consider. Will the proposal relieve practical difficulties that would prevent a reasonable use from complying with ordinance requirements? Are there circumstances that are unique to the property and not common to other similarly zoned properties? And would the variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood? And again, staff believes that the criteria is met. The practical difficulty in this case is the steep slopes that run through the site, again through here, and also the mature trees here that we're trying to save. So I've highlighted in orange here the mature oak trees that would be saved as a result of moving the home forward. And again, we're trying to stay away from that house to the south. These circumstances are certainly not created by the applicant. It's the natural topography here of the site. While this isn't completely unique, there are other sloped and treed areas within the R1 district. It's certainly not typical. Another factor to consider here is the area between the property line, which is located here, and the edge of the bituminous service. Typically, within that right-of-way, we have about 5 to 8 feet from the property line to the edge of a street. In this case, we have about 15 to 20 feet. So the effect is, from the street, the home would be about 65 feet back from the paved portion of the street. So there's that extra green space within the right-of-way. Also, staff believes it wouldn't alter the character of the neighborhood. There are a couple other properties that have similar setbacks to what's proposed. The house at 6621, right across the street, and at 6624 here, has a 42-foot setback, and the home across the street here has a 45-foot setback. So similar, again, to what's proposed here. The applicant is also suggesting that based on our maximum height requirements, you could build a house that would have a 40-foot measurement to the ridge line. They're pledging that this new home here would be no higher than 35 feet to the ridge line. A couple other things I didn't mention. The applicant is also suggesting a conservation easement. That's the area highlighted in yellow here. That would be a 10-foot easement to preserve some of the trees that are located in that area, to preserve that woodsy feel to the site. Staff is also suggesting that a conservation easement be placed over these mature oak trees to try to preserve those as best we can, and also to protect that slope area. So we would suggest expanding that conservation easement to cover those trees. The purpose of this is to save those trees and moving the house closer to the street. So with that, staff is recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report. Some of the conditions I would highlight would be this is subject to 9 Mile Creek Watershed District approval. So any conditions that they would have, they would also carry forward. Curb cut permits would be needed from our engineering department. In terms of grading and drainage plans, those would be reviewed at the time of a building permit, but the city engineer is suggesting that any drainage from the new house and retaining wall areas should be directed toward the street so as not to, especially with this southerly lot, directed away from that property to the south. That is also one of the conditions. And again, the maximum height to the ridge line of Lot 2 would be 35 feet, and then the conservation easements that I mentioned. So with that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Kerry. Questions for Kerry? Commissioner Grable.
Kerry, just so I'm clear about this, the proposed subdivision meets the requirements, so does the commission really have discretion concerning that?
We really don't. Okay. It conforms to our ordinance, so more or less they're entitled to that plat.
So the issue, in my mind, becomes the buildability of the slope. And isn't it, I recall, and you may recall, a few years ago, I think there was a lot just up the street that a similar kind of slope issue, and we approved a variance for that. I'm not sure. I get lost when I drive around Indian Hills, but...
Yeah, I don't recall the specifics of that. We do have a slope ordinance that talks about within a subdivision, slopes over 18%, you can't affect 25% of that area. With the building located in the slope area right here, they're just at 25%. Mm-hmm. So approval of the subdivision, if I could pull, this area up. If the subdivision is approved without the variance, they could build within this area. The footprint of this house may have to be reduced slightly, but not too much. And still, they would conform to that provision of the slope ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
Kerry, could you bring up the diagram with the circle of...
Certainly.
So is that a 500-foot, or what's the...
That is a 500-foot radius from the...
So the way our ordinance reads, the way we establish that median, both, we're establishing which dictates all of this, right?
Correct.
Whether they're not going to be able to subdivide is based on a 500-foot circle. And the struggle I have with this, and this has happened once before, is that in practical, and this looks fine on a plan, but in practical purposes, these are two different worlds in this circle, divided by a ridge. And on one side are subdivisions that were built, I'm assuming, at a much different time, much different types of lots, the whole deal. And yet, as I look at this, it's heavily impacted the fact that this, now we're saying that by our ordinance, we could subdivide this lot. And this is, but unless we change that, I'm assuming we don't have much discretion
That's right.
on that. I mean, the rule is you make a 500-foot circle, and it seems like we should be working on that because it feels wrong in this case. And so that part of it, it is what it is. And so really the discretion we have is whether or not we would allow a variance as we're approving a subdivision.
That's correct.
And the fact that this comes with a variance request, we can go yes or no.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions for Carrie? All right, hearing none, I'd ask if the applicant is present. Mr. Busen? Come on up and introduce yourself. Tell us about the project.
Great. Scott Busen, 4615 Wooddale Avenue in Edina, and president of Great Neighborhood Homes. Thanks for the time this evening and everybody attending this. We've had a lot of good discussion already about this property, and Indian Hills is a very unique neighborhood, and I understand the emotion attached and any kind of change that is put upon that neighborhood. So I'm going to plug in a presentation here, so you're going to have to bear with me. Low-tech guy with a high-tech piece of equipment here. Oh, there you go. Wow, it worked.
Very good.
Anyway, so I put a little presentation together to talk about Indian Hills and Blackfoot Pass. As Carrie mentioned, the lot, based on the current zoning rules and the subdivision rules, is subdividable into two lots without a variance. So, I think somebody at some point is going to subdivide this or can subdivide this. And our goal here today is to really show you how we worked hard to try to create a better subdivision. This property is very unique, and it's got a lot of technical aspects as far as the grade and the adjacency to neighboring homes. So we worked hard to try to create what I believe is a better subdivision, and that better subdivision does require a variance. So Indian Hills, you're familiar with it. It's an eclectic collection of larger lots on a wooded setting. Some wooded lots, some manicured lawns, many sizes of homes, but one common thing is really no two alike, I would say, when you drive through this neighborhood here. Blackfoot Pass, a small street, it's a transitional street between more manicured suburban feel lots of Cherokee Trail, Indian Hills Road, and the larger lake properties. It's a mix of wooded lots and open lawns when you drive through. Some wooded, some manicured, a mix of smaller and larger homes. So this is Cherokee Trail before you get into Blackfoot Pass. You can see a more suburban feel. Here's a home on Blackfoot Pass. This home is real manicured and not as wooded of a front. Here's a home on Cheyenne Trail. You can see this home is about 45 feet from the street, about 3 homes away. Here's a home. This is the home to the north on Blackfoot Pass, a little mix of wooded and manicured. This is the home across the street on Cheyenne Trail. It's on the lake. This is the home to the south, a large lawn, but there's some overgrowth in the front. You have a little wooded feel. And this is the home across the street again on the lake. So the existing home that's there, it's an older home. It's really ready to be torn down, really uninhabitable, and it's had its time. The entire property is pretty overgrown with mature trees, volunteer scrub trees, buckthorn, and some weeds. And there's a pool in the back the homeowners kept locked up there. So here's when you drive up to the home. This is the back. the screen porch. Here's an entry there. There's the entry and there's the pool. So as you can see, it's pretty overgrown. So I think it's sort of become a forest, a natural area. And I've been out there, I've seen wild turkeys, I've seen deer. It truly is a wooded setting. This is looking down towards the lot 2 from the higher part of the slope. So the goals of the subdivision, we want to redevelop the property to bring new families or empty nesters to the neighborhood, bring new energy. We want to work with the existing terrain as much as possible. It's kind of like if you're a golf aficionado, a Donald Ross approach, or he tried to build a golf course that worked with the land versus just scrape it and regrade it. We want to minimize impact to the forested streetscapes on Blackfoot Pass and Cheyenne Trail. We want to maintain the mature oak grove in the rear of the property that Carrie mentioned. We want to maintain the forested side lot views of the neighbors to the north and the south. And we want to build as far away from the adjacent homes as possible, maintain the privacy. And then we want to build a custom home using high quality architecture and materials. Here's the opening. Right now, if you look at the corner, there's a natural opening in the forest which is the ideal location for the driveways versus boring through a stone wall on the side and the mature trees. So you can see it again. This is looking from the west. This is looking down Cheyenne Trail to the south, and you see there's a city stone wall. There were some mature trees, a real charming look. When people walk by, I'm sure it's part of the character of the neighborhoods. We want to keep that intact. That's part of the reason for the 10-foot easement, conservation easement. This is, again, looking down to the south. This is looking back towards the corner. As you can see, it's very wooded. This is the property to the south looking at the side lot lines. This is where we would have that 10-foot conservation easement to maintain the view on the side lot there. This is the house to the south. This is looking on the other side of the property towards the north. Again, seeing the wooded lot there. And this is the property to the north. So that was our goal, is to position the home in that area where it had the opening in the forest, and then work with the property to try to find the optimal location that minimize the disruption to the land. We did redevelop another property close by, a couple blocks away at 6808 Cheyenne Circle. This was a vacant lot, didn't have any trees on it. It was a dirt lot for several years. Got stuck in the whole variance moratorium the state had for a while. We built a custom home in 2012 on the existing bare lot. It was completely void of trees. You'll see we maintain the wooded look from Cheyenne Trail. We designed the home around 2 mature oak trees, and then we planted over 50 new trees on the property. So if you went by today, this is what you would see. So though this was not as wooded as Blackfoot, this was really an open, barren lot. We kept all the big trees along the street, planted many new trees. That's the look from further up Cheyenne Trail from Valley View. There's the look as you approach the house from Cheyenne Circle. These are all big trees we planted there to maintain the forested look. This is again from the corner looking at the house. There's one of the mature oak trees we maintain. Those on the corner. It's kind of a landmark tree. Here's a tree in the back. So we actually designed the house in the back around this big oak tree. So when you look at the house, you'll see the tree over the top of the house. And this is from Cheyenne Trail. You can see it's that we kept the wooded look. So I think we've got a track record of working in the neighborhood like we are proposing here today. As far as neighborhood engagement, we mailed the site plan letter to all neighbors within 500 feet. We had a neighbor meeting. All the adjacent neighbors attended. We spent a lot of time walking them through the plans, getting their feedback. And based on that, I heard loud and clear that they really liked the forested look from the street. So what we did is we revised our site plan to add these conservation easements to the plan. So, again, we have a purchase agreement for this property that's contingent upon getting a subdivision. So for us, we're just here to come up with a better approach to the subdivision. We think the variance would definitely give the neighborhood a better subdivision than someone just coming in and just doing it without a variance. And however, I've talked to a lot of people, and I'm definitely open to any creative ideas or solutions that people have. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Busen. Any questions for Mr. Busen? Commissioner Forrest.
Yeah, could you expand a bit on your conservation easement? Because, when you have woodland management, it's more than just letting things grow there. It's letting good things grow, controlling other things, whatever. So I'm just wondering how you envision implementing that.
Well, again, I probably would want to work with the forester, the city of Edina, and talk about, because it's true when you have trees that get clogged up by undergrowth and things like buckthorn, they compete for nutrients and light. So that would definitely be based upon the feedback. I'm sure the neighbors and the future homeowners wouldn't want that just to be, unmanaged. But I think the goal would be to maintain things like the stone wall, the larger trees, and then, like things like driveways or patios or things like that, we would want to go into that setback. So I would work with the forester to come up with recommendations on that. I'm perfectly willing for that to be part of the variance approval, to be a consultation or approval of the city forester.
And you're willing to then, like, do the buckthorn removal and repair any wall or whatever that needs to be done? And,
sure.
And
Yeah.
address drainage is another biggie. And then I know that this was tabled until tonight, so apparently there was a previous iteration. What improvements have you made since then, or what's your thought process to make this a better project?
Well, it's something that we spent a lot of time studying it, walking the site, and one of the big things was adding the conservation easement. I wanted to come back with a site plan that showed that. I think that was pretty important. And you drive around Indian Hills, you see, like I said, some just manicured, wide open, weed whack to the road, where you see several that are like this that have the forested look, and it gives it that up north feel that I think people are really desiring to keep in place.
Commissioner Platter.
So one of the things that staff had mentioned earlier on the conservation easement, it sounded like their recommendation was to expand that easement. Are you proposing to expand that to capture the oaks you're speaking of? In the back, I guess half or almost of the lots that you're proposing, or needs a variance? And was there anything else talked about on the other lot potentially as far as those sloping sides or anything on that as well?
To be honest, that was something Carrie asked for, where the oak tree is, and that's something that, when you look at the site, they're really not in the way of, they would be in the way of the home without a variance, but they wouldn't. It's a forest that not only the neighbors, but the homeowner would want to see those. So I think keeping that in place would be a good idea. I've not heard of like tree conservation on a property per se, but again, that's something I'm willing to talk to the forester about. I mean, I guess the big thing is just, we want to protect trees, but they also get storm damaged, and some are disease susceptible. So, whatever that conservation easement would have to have allowances for, disease removal, based on like the city forester inspection.
Yeah, assuming it does. I'm assuming it does. I don't know any. It sounds like it is. So I would like to see you expanding that to include that oak area in the back behind that house in the conservation easement. That way, it doesn't appear to me that you would ever build back there anyway. So I don't know why it wouldn't be reasonable to do that in the back of the home there.
Yeah, I think it would just relating to the existing trees. I think that would be agreeable, relating to the oak trees themselves.
Yeah, I don't know where you'd strike a line exactly. I mean, that would,
right.
However, yeah.
I could probably use some help with that, as again from the forester.
Sure.
What if it's like it's a tree, or I'm not sure legally how that's recorded on a deed, if the tree's tagged or how it works, but I'm open to working with the city resources on that.
Yeah, if I could just chime in quickly. It would work similar to the Acres du Bois subdivision, where we had a tree conservation. We walked the site with the forester and picked out the specific trees that needed to be saved and protected in the future. And then essentially we're, along with the city attorney, the forester, and Scott, we would write that language that would have some provisions for storm damage, replacement, that kind of thing.
I think it would allow the removal of noxious trees like buckthorn and everything like that, right? So it's literally this tree, right? That would be
correct
as part of that.
I mean, from a builder's perspective, trees are expensive to remove. So when part of your site plan, you're always trying to keep trees, not only because of the look, but I mean, to get back there and pull those trees is, you need a crane and a boom, and it's quite expensive. So, it's something that from an aesthetic and a budgetary standpoint, we definitely would be interested in.
So it's a win-win situation, right?
It's a win-win.
Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Any other questions for Mr. Busen? Commissioner Potts.
A few more questions about the trees. When I look at the proposed home on Lot 2 versus the one that would meet the current setback rules. I realize some of those trees in front are cottonwood and bad trees, but there's also a nice mix of several different species. I see elm, ash, oak, mixed around there. So taking those out, if we grant this setback variance, is really going to, looks like it'll dramatically change the character of this lot. And it looks like, I guess when I look at this, I'm wondering how much of an issue are the trees really? Because it seems like either way, you're going to remove about the same number, and it's more an issue of the slope.
It's really an issue of both. I mean, we're talking about, you know, here right now, I'm counting 1, 2, 3. There's 14 oak trees without a variance, and then if we, with a proposed home here, we have a 6-inch elm, 25-inch cottonwood, which I don't know if there's cottonwood lovers, but there's also cottonwood haters out there as far as the debris. A 6-inch elm, a 6-inch deciduous, a 10-inch elm, 8-inch elm.
Cottonwoods don't have as large a lobby as the other ones, I don't think. So.
So there's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 9 trees. Again, it's opinion whether an oak tree is better than an elm tree. I think oaks seem to have a little more emotion attached to them, I think, a little bit, but I'm sure it's open to debate. And then we tried to look at how we tried to position the home, you know, the driveway working around the trees, the proposed walk. So we're really trying to work within the trees that are there. And again, it's trying to, you know, keep that forested look from Blackfoot and Cheyenne. But again, I'm open to any ideas. I mean, I'm not a forester.
Just, Mr. Busen, keeping that graphic that we have on the screen in front of us, I'm just trying to get a sense in the buildable pad of the drop, and actually blowing it up a little bit like that helps. It looks to me like we're talking about around a 12-foot drop from the highest elevation. Looks like about 9-12 on the backside of where that buildable, you know, where the compliant site would be, down to about 900. Is that right?
Yes, and the proposed home, the home without a variance will be built at a higher elevation because of that, because we're building it up higher on the hill. So yeah, you're right. It's a pretty steep. There's a pretty steep retaining wall in the rear of the home that requires a variance that goes from about 916 down to about 902.
And where
14 foot.
And where you're proposing, it looks like it goes from roughly 898 down to 892.
About 900. Well, the house goes up a little bit. Yeah, it's about 890.
Looks like 898 in the back, or 8.
Yep.
At its highest point, and down to a low point of 890. If you can slide it down a little bit.
Yep. About 8 feet.
892.
I think it's about 6 feet lower.
So you got a 6-foot slope there. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Busen? All right. Commissioner Scheer.
I'm assuming that one of the reasons we waited to have this meeting is that you were having additional meetings with people in the neighborhood. We are in receipt in our packets tonight of 11 letters from neighbors, close neighbors, it's my neighborhood so I know all the names, who are opposed. Now, some of them are opposed to the subdivision, which is a slightly different question based on our code than the location of the properties. But I guess what I would like to know in those conversations you've had with neighbors, how you would characterize their feelings about the two locations?
You know, I've had trouble communicating that to them a little bit. I mean, I've tried. You know, we had a meeting, nothing negative, but these surveys are pretty complicated to look at. You know, and right now the houses, where the houses are located, it's such thick woods. Mm-hmm. You know, so like when I spoke with a neighbor at 6705, I tried to explain how, you know, the home, like if you look at right now, her home to the home without a variance is approximately, 30 feet away, mm-hmm. whereas, we're much closer to like, 80 to 100 feet away. So I did explain that to them. I didn't get really a positive or a negative response, which is fine. Everybody has a right to their opinion or not being forthcoming. But I've had a neighbor meeting. I've followed up with some phone conversations about that, and been offered to meet personally to walk through it as well. But I did meet with the adjacent neighbors and showed them what we were doing and where the house would be positioned and I think the feedback. I think it's change. First of all, change is always something new. But I think it was also just concern about the forested look of the street. That was the biggest feedback that I received, and people maintaining their privacy. So, and that's really what we're trying to achieve with that, was, maintain the privacy for the neighbor at 6705, and then just, disrupting the lot as minimally as possible.
So you wouldn't categorize it as an overwhelming vote for one pad or the other?
No, and I think, you look at, we send it out to, 500, we send it out to, I don't know what the count is on the 500-foot, we send it out to about, what do we have on their carry for 500 feet?
So you sent
It's
to
about
all the
30,
people on that
30
list.
properties.
We have your list. I think it was about 30 individuals.
Yeah, and
right?
that's pretty aggressive. That's what we do. We always have the neighbor. And, I know there was a letter campaign from one neighbor to the neighbors. I don't know. I think that might have gone wider because I have friends that received it further away. So I think, 10 responses out of, if that was, I don't know if it was 100 or whatever, it's pretty normal, I think. And I think that, when Edina did the survey about redevelopment, it was kind of the sort of follow the line of, opposition versus in favor. I mean, you'll never really hear from the favorable people. That's my experience. And I really didn't aggressively pursue that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Busen? Commissioner Potts.
Could you describe the retaining walls you're seeking with the house if we approve the variance?
So what the retaining walls are for, so if you look at, it's really we're talking about lot 2. So right now you come in the driveway of lot 2 and there's a garage facing Blackfoot. And then if you look at the retaining walls you've got, they're the kind of the dash lines there. It sort of looks like it's like a C. The dash lines with the angles, those are the retaining walls there. So they would be staggered down from about 912 to about 901 in that area. So it would stagger down from like 12 feet, 6 feet, and then down to try to create some kind of a backyard access.
So you're proposing a level backyard that sort of digs into the
Yes.
existing hill?
Yes.
And I see 2 parallel walls there. Are those 2 6-foot walls, or?
One is at, he's got it 912 and 910, but it's probably like 912, 906. Usually we split the difference with that.
And then the entry into the house is 897, do I see? 898, something like that?
Yeah, though the first floor will be 901, so we'll step down to probably the 898 area there. And what we're really trying to do is, if you look at the drainage lines here, we're trying to create drainage around the north side. So we're trying to push water over to the driveway and go that way with it. So, what the Planning Commission did as far as requiring stormwater and erosion control plans from an engineer for new homes, this really will apply here. So what you'll have is study of stormwater flows, rates, and then how much impervious surface is there, and then what the requirement is for that. So like on Cheyenne Circle, we did the home there. We worked with the watershed district, and we did rain gardens over there, and worked hand in hand with them on that. So when this goes in for permitting with the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, there will be a requirement for us to do stormwater much more aggressive than if we're just doing a tear down, one of the smaller lots. And then they'll there'll be a bond that have to be issued. We'll have to place a bond to execute the changes that they put on the stormwater plan. There's an inspection before the bond is released, and that's recorded on the deed. So it's pretty aggressive when you're working with the watershed district as far as how they treat stormwater.
All right, further questions? There'll be an opportunity after the public hearing to have discussion. Thank you, Mr. Busey.
Yeah, thanks for all your time.
This is a public hearing, and so I'm going to open the public hearing at this time and ask that anybody who would like to come forward and comment on this particular project, please come to one of the side microphones. If you have something you need to show us, you could use the center microphone, but you'll have to use a handheld. Introduce yourself, give us your name and address, and we'd ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. So anyone who'd like to come up and comment on this project, this would be the time to do it. And as Commissioner Shearer mentioned, we did get a number of written comments submitted as well, so we have those too. Well, that leaves just one application. There's got to be somebody here for this one.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My
Welcome.
name is Tara Dev, and thank you for giving us this opportunity.
And what is your address, Ms. Dev?
It is 6804 Cheyenne Trail, and
Great.
I am
you.
the
Welcome.
resident of the home, which is adjacent to the home that was just built by Mr. Busen, which is on Cheyenne Circle. There are a couple of things I want to address with this proposed, although that the house that is being proposed is down the road from us. I do have a few thoughts on having experienced firsthand construction next door to our home. We have been residents of Edina for the last 15 years now and have lived in different parts of Edina. Started off in the country club area and then lived in the Braemar area, and finally decided on Indian Hills as sort of our long-term home. One of the big lure of moving to Indian Hills was the beauty of the neighborhood, the natural beauty of the neighborhood, the age of the trees and the privacy that provided in the neighborhood. There's been, builders coming in gradually into the neighborhood, and you can kind of see driving around that, things are changing a little bit, but as was addressed to before, it is a changing neighborhood with a variety of homes and variety of styles of homes. Cheyenne Trail is a beautiful street leading into Blackfoot Pass, and the pictures that Mr. Busen showed you of his new construction home it's a lovely home, and when I was asked to come and speak to that for the variance for that home, I was very happy to support it. I do think it's important to have nice building and construction. However, I do feel that there were no pictures shown of the back or of the complete loss of privacy that we now have between our two homes. Yes, there were 2 oaks preserved on that lot, but everything else was torn down. And now, literally from inside my house, I can see through the neighboring house and into Cheyenne Circle directly. And that's from, most of the side views of our home. In the process, we've had to invest a lot of money ourselves into re-landscaping the property. And so I do disagree with that, or at least it raises the question of, is the intent really there to preserve privacy? And had I wanted this kind of a neighbor, honestly, I could be living in Eden Prairie. I mean, there's plenty of people who can build a nice, beautiful house and re-landscape, but it doesn't, it takes years and decades to build up the kind of environment that we have now in Indian Hills. That is one of the things, and I think that in all the plans that we've looked at, nothing has been addressed about the neighboring homes and the loss of privacy. Within the lot, I also feel, having raised young children in the neighborhood and buses and having that corner, and that having, there's also an issue that is a very tight curve going around there. Having 2 driveways, I do think, is an issue. There isn't a lot of room to see that driveway as you come out. So I do think that there are concerns, and I just also feel it's heartbreaking to see, homes crammed in together when you have such a lovely lot. Okay. And I'm not against new construction, but I do feel that these are some of the issues that need to be looked at more carefully, because you can't recreate that environment once it's torn down and once it's gone.
All right. Thank
So,
you, Ms.
thank you
Depp.
very much.
Anyone else who'd like to comment on this application?
My name is Charlie Letter, and I live at 6709 Cheyenne Trail. I am 2 properties to the south of the property in question, 1 home in between us and the proposed subdivision. I was heartbroken to see the subdivision sign go up on that property. Has been previously stated, obviously wooded land that creates the essence of the character of Indian Hills. Commissioner Fisher's recognition of the way in which the average lot size is calculated is extremely accurate in this situation. The lots to the east of Cheyenne Trail and Blackfoot Pass are on Gleason. It was a neighborhood created at a very, very different time and under very different circumstances from Indian Hills, and to include those as being average lot size for consideration of the subdivision is a little bit of an artifact. The drive as you come north on Cheyenne Trail from Valley View and approach this property is a curving drive. This property sits on a promontory that is created by a Y. And for the adjacent property to the south to have a setback of 100.9 feet, and then to move this property onto that already prominent location on that corner to a 45-foot setback, 55.9 feet in front of that property, is really an aberration in the sight lines of the contiguous properties on that east side of the street. The setbacks that are cited by the developer as being similar in nature are on the island block that is formed by Blackfoot Pass and Cheyenne Trail. These are 3 homes that are on this separate island. They really are not within the sight line as you approach that, and I believe that one of the reasons for establishing those setbacks is to have consistency within those same sight lines on the same side of the street. I've lived in Edina since 1959. I've lived in this homes for the last 27 years. I witnessed the great flood of July 1987 when we had 14 inches of rain. I know where the water goes. I know where the water pools, and it pooled there. The nature of these lots together creates a bowl type of effect, and the water drains into that bowl. To put another building on that site is going to displace the water into the lot on the south adjacent to it, and I think represents a real problem. That neighbor has installed drainage system and tiling on their own to help deal with that issue, and I think that this will greatly exacerbate that problem. It is a safety.
If you could wrap up, your 3 minutes is concluded.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address the board. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Anyone else who'd like to comment on this application?
My name is Tim Keane, Keane, with Melkerson Gunn Martin, and I'm here on behalf of several property owners who reside in historic Indian Hills. And as I make my introductory comments, could the graphics go back to the staff report and the 500-foot radius exhibit, please? Thank you. There's a reason why the subject property is a very large lot. And that's because by any reasonable measure, most of it is unbuildable. The slopes are severe. The buildable pad at the top of the parcel, which is a fairly significant slope to reach, is the buildable plateau on the existing parcel. And the people that laid out Indian Hills over 50 years ago knew what they were doing. They were preserving the topography, they were preserving the significant stands of important vegetation, and that's why this lot is as large as it is, because most of it is unbuildable by any reasonable measure. Speaking to the city's policy, and Commissioner Fisher did hit on what I think is a critical issue that the city should address. There's a policy behind the median lot creation requirement, and presumably it's to maintain the scale, continuity, consistency of neighborhoods. And the neighborhoods that we have here, there's an accident of history. 17 of the lots that were considered in the median computation are outside of Indian Hills. They don't have much in common with one another. They were created decades apart. There is no connectivity between the two neighborhoods. There's no identity between the two neighborhoods. And I would submit that the policy behind the requirement of the median standard is defeated when an accident of history, such as one neighborhood next to another, is going to govern the outcome. And it does govern the outcome of this, because 19 of the lots that are considered within Indian Hills have a median of 50,200 square feet. These two lots at 40 and 30,000 square feet could not be created if Indian Hills alone was considered. The median in the 17 that are outside is roughly 21,000 square feet. Great disparity. I know that time is limited, so I will address very briefly the variance standards that you are subject to three findings, and I see my time is short. But
can you? I think we've got the variance stuff in front of us, and I think you've used your 3 minutes. The one question I'd have you answer, Mr. Keene, is what, even if all of the things you say are true about the policy behind our rule for the subdivision, what are we to do with the fact that our ordinance says 500 feet, create a median, and that creates what staff tells us are subdividable lots that meet all of the requirements of our ordinance?
I would submit that the second smaller lot is not buildable without significant variances. I was quite surprised to find, as I researched your ordinance, that you do not have slope protections in your ordinance, either setback or slope preservation requirements in your ordinance. But even at that, the amount of grading and severity of the buildability of that second lot, I think, is greatly, and you do have the discretion, and I don't think the findings can be met to satisfy a variance. The conditions are self-imposed by the applicant. They've decided where to put the lot lines. They decided where to put the house pad. Those are circumstances that are imposed upon the applicant by themselves.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Keene.
Thank you.
Any other comments on this application?
I live at 4 Merrill Lane. The gentleman raised a point that I want to follow up on, because I'm really here to talk about 5 Merrill Lane, but what this gentleman just said struck me. And a couple of you have already asked, do you have discretion? Of course you have discretion. That's why you have hearings. If you wonder whether you have discretion, don't ask us. Talk to the city attorney. Get a legal opinion. Let us review it. We'll give you a legal opinion. In my opinion, you do have discretion. Under Section 850 of the Edina ordinances, the guiding principles for your committee, your guiding principle is to preserve the integrity of our neighborhoods. You can look at the individual rules, but your guiding principle is to preserve the integrity of our neighborhoods. That gives you the discretion. I'll address you later on 5 Merrill Lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evinger. Other comments on this application? Don't be shy.
Hi, Council. Jim Schwinder at 6700 Cheyenne Trail. I actually live directly west of the proposed division, and so I agree with everyone's comments this evening. My biggest concern is that it does change the character of the community and our neighborhood. When I drive out of my driveway every morning, what I see is a tree-lined next-door neighbor. I would be very concerned with the facts of the trees that are being taken down as a result of this variance that the builder is asking. I would certainly want a much more defined plan of that, because these trees are very mature, and the concept of moving the home towards the street, Cheyenne Trail, and north, I don't know if that actually preserves any trees. I mean, we talk about the importance of a oak tree versus a cottonwood tree, but they're all very mature trees, and I think that is a way potentially for the builder to allow the town to change the plans to allow for two homes built in this one, what I believe is a very appropriate lot for a single family large home, just like it exists today, which would continue to maintain the character of the community. So I would like the board, the commission, to take a very good look at really what is entailed by this concept of the subdivision. I am not in favor of a subdivision at all. The reason why I moved into the community was actually to have a nice home on a nice bit of land and to continue to keep the character of the community.
Thank you, Mr. Schwinder.
You're welcome.
Other comments?
I'm Patricia Kreisiger, and I live
Ms.
south
Kreisinger,
of this property.
Could I get you to just turn that graphic around 180 degrees? So we'll get north pointing up there. There, and then they'll take care of zooming in or zooming out. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
Did you want me to start over?
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, Pat Kreisiger, and I live at 6705 Cheyenne Trail. So I'm adjacent to this property and to where this second home would go if that's what is going to happen. I agree with everything that has been said for my neighbors, and I'm sorry that Mr. Keene was cut short, because he's really here to represent practically all of us neighbors. There are lots of concerns that I have. This map will show the original Indian Hills area, and it definitely does not include any of those properties that were behind us up on St. Albans Circle or Gleason Court or Gleason Road. I'm sure you've gotten the impression from all of us who have spoken that Indian Hills is a very, very special place to all of us, and that's why we live there. We want to preserve it. We want to keep it the way it is. I do not think that this is a buildable lot either. I have many concerns beyond what's been mentioned. I'm concerned about drainage since I'm right next to this. We bought our house in 1980. We first saw it in 1969. It took us 11 years to get the home of our dreams. And I'm hoping I can live there for the rest of my life because I think it's just a wonderful place to live and it's a wonderful neighborhood. The neighbors care about one another. Each of these neighbors loves his or her home and also cares about the other people in the neighborhood. It's a wonderful place in which to live. When the property behind us was being developed, and specifically St. Albans Circle, this was in 1980 when we were in the process of purchasing our home. There was a huge problem with drainage. In fact, the builder back there had to put up 3 retaining walls before one of them served the purpose. I have drain tile in my home, I have a sump pump, and when we get these monster rains, I have water that will even seep up through the parquet floor in my basement. So I am really concerned about any more water draining onto my property. As I've said, and this like Commissioner Fisher said before, this perhaps the council is going to want to, or this committee is going to want to think about how you define where you draw your 500-foot radius, because like I said in my letter that I sent about a month ago, you're comparing apples and oranges when you are comparing an area like Indian Hills and the area behind it. And this is true of other neighborhoods in Edina as well, and I would think if you don't already have issues with those, you might in the future. So I really don't think it's a fair comparison. I don't think this is a buildable lot. And I don't know if I should mention this or not, but I heard some screeching tires late this afternoon, and I understand that it was Mr. Busen coming around the corner of Cheyenne Trail onto Blackfoot Pass, and I understand that he nearly missed an Edina utility vehicle. Mr. Busen? Would you care to address that? Are you?
No.
Well, all right.
Ms.
Okay.
Krasinger, we're not going to
All right.
litigate whether Mr. Busen was driving too fast in the neighborhood. I appreciate the comment.
I used to teach business law. Maybe I got a little carried away. I apologize.
Ms. Krasinger, if you could wrap up, your 3 minutes has expired.
Yes, I'll wrap up in just a second. I have 2 statements I'd like to make, but just to reiterate this business, I know that Dr. Letter was trying to mention the safety issue, and he ran out of time. But before I run out of time, just a couple of parting comments here.
Briefly,
this
please.
whole business of subdividing properties in Indian Hills would set a new precedent. One of my questions is, what is the underlying motive of the owner, the builder, and the city to promote this? And secondly, why would the city approve a subdivision? And I do thank you very much for your consideration and your time.
Thank you, Ms. Krasinger. Other comments? You're not coming up to talk about the fast driving. We're not doing that.
The reason I'm asking to speak is the neighbors have an attorney representing many members and the Pat's attorney. And
You know what? Why don't you make sure you get a microphone, Mr. Busen?
I just thought I could speak because the one party spoke twice as well. So anyway, the near miss today, so to speak, was a
Don't.
Okay.
Don't even.
Never mind. That wasn't me. So
yeah. All right.
Anyway, so in any event, I want to just touch on the we're just doing things the way the city asks us to do them, and these are rules that the Planning Commission have put in place. However, we're here to try to make a better subdivision by asking for a variance and trying to do things that are not follow the zoning to make things better for reasons you heard tonight. The neighbor to the home we did on Cheyenne, 6808 Cheyenne Trail, that was a much different situation. Those homes were much closer together. And with our variance, we are trying to get further away from Pat's home so that she would not look into the neighbor's home. So the one testimony that came up, that's what we're trying to achieve, of not being in the neighbor's face with the home.
One question I have for you, Mr. Busen, on the issue that Mr. Keene raised and Ms. Krasinger followed up on, with respect to the permissible buildable area. They are suggesting that that is not, in fact, buildable. I mean, I understand that you say it's preferable for a variety of reasons to get a variance and build outside of that pad, but I think they raise an interesting question about whether, without a variance, could you even build a home in that spot?
Well, I don't think any builder who understands his business is going to go in and purchase an $800,000 property when he can't build a home on the property. We've done extensive soil testing, engineering analysis, surveying, multiple parties inquiring on that, and so we would not move into this without that assurance. I'm a pretty conservative, I'm mainly a builder, but I'm a small developer. I'm a pretty conservative. I don't try to hit home runs. I try to hit singles and doubles. And for us to stick our neck out on a property like this and not have it be buildable would be really foolish. So from a financial and business standpoint, I'm by no means interested in purchasing something that's not buildable. But we did soil borings. The soil there is bearing soil in that area. Again, we're trying to get the home to be built so we maintain to improve the situation of the water drainage onto Pat's property next door by diverting it down the driveway and on the street.
I didn't understand that to be the question. I understood the question to be if the buildable area on the lot, if it's subdivided up at the top of the hill or on the side of the hill. I thought the question was, can you build a house there?
Yes.
On the top of the hill?
Can you build a house if there's no variance? Can you build a house on the buildable area of this lot?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else you want
to add? And the last thing I want to
me?
address is this, a lot of people, I understand the emotion and, the 500-foot rule, is it fair? I mean, but it's what is written. However, a lot of the testimony has said we should look at more adjacent homes and studying that. And the reality, if you look at the homes that, Mr. Leader's home, Pat's home, the three homes to the south, if you took the median and mean of those three homes, they're really close and are really representing more, close by neighborhood. They are the mean and median of the two lots that we're trying to subdivide. So if you are going to take that argument of throw the 500 rule out and let's look at what's next door, we are at the mean and median of those three lots. So we're even better in that regard.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Busen. Anyone who has not had a chance to speak who would like to speak on this application? Come on up.
My name's William Lund. I'm 6308 Indian Hills Road. We've been there about 40 years. I guess I have one question for Mr. Busen. First of all, would you be able to sell this house, this lot, this development anyplace else except it happens to be in Indian Hills, when the areas you use to surround to try to split this lot in half, which is absolutely unbuildable, it wouldn't, the only reason he's trying to do it is because we have a great neighborhood and he's trying to piggyback two homes on it. This is what's wrong with this. This is the nuts and bolts of the whole thing. I had some other items, but my wife would like to speak, but instead of having her speak, she'd like to have I missed her name, speak for her. So I'd like to have you give him another 3 minutes if you could speak for my wife.
How does he know what your wife wants to say? You had some telepathic communication, Mr. Keene, with Mr. Lund's wife? Look, I think we're getting the gist of it. I don't think saying the same thing over and over again isn't going to give it more weight to us. We get the point about a variety of issues. If there's somebody who hasn't spoke, I see a hand in the back. Why don't you come on up?
Good evening to all. My name's Dave Frauenschuh. I'm a developer. You probably know that. I just want it to be known, 10 years ago, I bought a lot within 500 feet of this for $800,000 and put a house on it. So it is not out of market. to own this lot and build a house on it.
Thank you, Mr. Frownshoe.
Hi, I'm Mary Swanson. I live at 6617 Cheyenne Trail, 2 doors away. And my house was pictured, but what wasn't pictured is that over 50% of our lot is woods. The picture was taken of the house where there is grass in the front and the side, but 100 feet on the side and the entire back is all total woods. The only thing that's been taken down is buckthorn. And that's the reason we bought our house, was for the total woods. When you walk down Cheyenne Tree, that's all you see is all the beautiful woods, and I feel the essence of our neighborhood is going to slowly be changed.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak? All right, with that, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
And is there a second? Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. I want to thank you all for your comments. They are very enlightening, and we appreciate all of that input. So, a couple of questions I do want to address before we start discussion. There were discussions about, in the public comments, about safety issues with the traffic and how that's impacted. Has staff done any review of that? Has that issue come up as the application's been processed?
When we meet internally, different departments, engineering, police, fire, et cetera, we did talk about the driveways. And there weren't any concerns that the proposed driveway locations would cause any problem. So staff seemed comfortable with the driveway locations.
And I know there's been a lot of conversation about drainage. I know Mr. Busen talked about the watershed district review, but can you share with us, Carrie, the review from an engineering and a city perspective on drainage? How would that work out if this project were to proceed?
Yes, certainly. Chair and members of the commission, I believe the engineering staff is seeing this as an opportunity to make things possibly better out there in requiring all the drainage that's going to come off of a new home on that southern lot to drain toward the street. So I think they felt confident that the situation could be improved from current conditions today.
All right, thank you.
Oh, Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Potts.
May I ask a staff question?
Absolutely.
So relative, Planner Teague, to the setbacks, if we, this is a little bit hypothetical, but bear with me. If we grant this variance and the house is built 45 feet back and the existing home is demolished completely, is there now a new precedent set for a setback of the home that could be built on the buildable area 1?
It would not. The home on Lot 2 is dictated by, the required front yard setback for the home on Lot 2 is dictated by the lot to the south. So it wouldn't impact if that home to the north is removed, because this is a corner lot.
I guess I'm asking about would the setback for Lot 1 get smaller? Could that Lot 1 home, if they choose not to build on the existing foundation, could they move it closer to Blackfoot Pass now that there's a new home 45 feet back?
They would not. The required setback for Lot 1 is dictated by the lot to the north, and I believe that's around 60 feet. So that's the required setback for Lot 1, whether the home stays or not.
Okay, thank you.
So other discussion by the commission? Commissioner Scheer.
I wanted to ask Carrie, so I want to be clear about what we're voting on here. We've sort of mixed our discussions about the subdivision with the placement of the homes. So is this an all-inclusive vote? We're voting on a subdivision with the placement in the area closer to the street as proposed by the builder?
Correct. The request is for a subdivision with a lot area or a front yard setback variance for lot number 2. You could separate them and approve the plat and deny the variance if you so chose.
Commissioner Forrest.
Planner Teague, I'm going back to Commissioner Potts' question about the setback from for that existing, the lot where the proposed lot where the existing house currently is, because I'm looking at your circle diagram again, to give it a nickname, and it looks like you've indicated setbacks on that diagram, and then the house to the north, it's indicated. And I'm not sure that's exactly what's being indicated here, but it looks like it's being indicated along Indian Hills Road, even though it has a Blackfoot Pass address. I'm just kind of unclear. If you could, I don't know, is it possible to kind of...
The lines that you see...
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it's...
The way the lot width is measured is at a line 50 feet back from the front lot line. So
gotcha.
that's what
that
that line represents.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Fisher.
Chair Stein, I'd like to ask Mr. Teague a couple more questions, if that's all right. Carrie, you just said that we would be improving the situation by allowing the stormwater to drain to the street. That seems counterintuitive to me. I think for me, you'd want to, having low spots on sites to retain water while the storm's happening and not pushing it to the streets, to me, would be a more positive. Can you expound a little bit how engineering thought that would improve it?
Yeah, that certainly would be an option to hold the water before it gets to the street. That would be another
That's
solution.
the generally accepted practice. Is you want to hold the water so you're not creating, because putting more water in the streets is creating a problem for somebody, somewhere.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, when I was referring to making the situation better, I was referring to the lot to the south.
Oh, and that's possible.
So there won't be as much drainage going that way.
So the other question I have is, I'm sorry to keep going back to this 500-foot radius rule, but can you remind me, how long has that been in place? And have we run into this before, where it's such a clear, well, let's put it this way. I could see a pattern of subdivision requests along edges of our neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the 80s. And that ordinance came about because of this very concern about impacting the character of neighborhoods. So the thought was if we take a median within all properties of 500 feet, it would address that issue somewhat. But I believe it goes back to the mid-80s? Early 90s?
Okay, so it's been around a while. I don't recall it. I've only been on the planning commission for a couple hours, but I don't just I just don't recall dealing with it in this way.
Yeah, I did create a graphic that I could put on the screen that shows some of the surrounding lot areas compared to the proposed lot areas, and they're actually quite similar, if that might help the commission.
It would help me.
More information is better.
Hey, Carrie, one thing too, or maybe, I don't know where Chris went. Could you do the mean and the median of the Indian Hill side of those? I can't quite read them enough to do it at least it's a little unclear in the information what those are.
Could you repeat that? I'm not sure I entirely followed that.
So whatever there are, 15 lots that are in that 500-foot circle. Just for curiosity, on the Indian Hills side, what is the mean and median of those lots?
Oh, of just those?
Of just those.
Yep, we have not run that calculation.
Commissioner Potts.
I don't think I have any more questions, but I want to say, Commissioner Fisher, you're doing very well for your first couple hours on Planning Commission. But back to, on this topic of the 500-foot circle and the character of neighborhoods, I think when we're on the edge of a neighborhood, we've got an inherent conflict. And by analogy, I think about White Oaks. We stop counting at France Avenue when we look at means and medians, and this is a similar sort of area, and that gives me as much heartburn as anyone else. A different neighborhood, different city. I think if we're the character of a neighborhood, in my mind, with a proposal like this, we're dealing with Indian Hills and not nearly half of that 500-foot radius. So that's the conflict for me. And I think if there were ever a lot that seems like it should only have one house on it, or at least one this size, this is the one, at least the most clear example I've seen since I've been here. So when I look at the proposals for buildable area, it seems to me in either of these two homes, the one that's within buildable area limits or the one that's proposed by variance, to build either of them requires removal of many mature trees and requires extreme grading, haul off of dirt and very large retaining walls. And I think that's what I'm thinking about when I think about how, if you can even get two homes on this lot. It's my inclination is not to support this variance request. I think it might be possible to subdivide this lot and create more buildable areas. I don't know. Certainly not our job to design it, but I think the change in character that the variant to the neighborhood that granting a variance would allow would be rather dramatic, as well as the other things I've seen here in terms of the drainage, the large retaining wall proposed.
Commissioner Grable.
I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here. With respect to White Oaks, France Avenue, on the other side of France Avenue is Minneapolis, so the 500-foot doesn't apply. We're stuck with the 500-foot. And Michael, you may recall there was a proposal to subdivide a lot south of Southview Junior High not too long ago, where 3 subdivisions came together. You remember when we were dealing with that 500 feet, we were stuck with the 500 feet. We don't have discretion to worry about the 500 feet because that's what it is. Even so, if you just do an eyeball, it looks like the median of the lots in Indian Hills are all pretty close to what would be done. So, in response to the question about what are the motives of the owner, well, it's easy. The motives of the owner are to maximize the value of its real estate. And all of the neighbors who, for whatever reason, are opposed to this, in a similar circumstance would want to maximize the value of their real estate. And I think there's nothing wrong with doing that. That's what people do. With respect to the trees, yeah, it is nice to preserve trees, but Edina does not have a tree ordinance. Presumably, Mr. Buchan could go onto that lot and clear cut the lot. He's not proposed to do that. He's proposed several conservation easements. He's proposed a placement of the house to maximize the value or to preserve oak trees, which, as he said, seem to hold a special place in the hearts of Edinians. The character of the neighborhood, in my judgment, I drove that area today, and it seems to me that it's not out of place given the variety of homes and the closeness of some of the homes to the streets in that area. This doesn't seem to be out of line, although with the subdivision, which he is entitled to, he could build a home on both lots without a variance. It seems to me he's made an effort here by asking for this variance to do a better job for the neighborhood than without. The one question I do have that is the question of the water, and I'm wondering if anybody knows if that area at the southwest corner of the lot where it butts your property, has that ever been designated some kind of floodplain, or is there any kind of restriction on that? Does anybody know?
Carrie, do you have that?
I don't believe that's 100-year floodplain area, no.
Okay.
Okay.
So anyway, I guess, and I'm also impressed by the fact that he's willing to limit the height of the building to 35 feet. I was looking at some other areas with some new houses being built in Edina in other areas, and what impressed me, or in a bad way, with some of the new construction is how high and overpowering the buildings can be. And if a builder is willing to limit height, I think it's a good thing. In other words, I think Mr. Busen has proposed some rather interesting restrictions on his ability to do things. And one final point raised by Mr. Keene, with respect to an easement, I would suggest that the need for an easement, or a need for a variance, excuse me, is not self-imposed. The need for the variance is caused by the topography of the lot and that slope. Again, we granted an easement for a house not too far from that area before. I can't remember which street it was on, but the reason we granted the easement was because, variance. I keep saying easement. I mean variance. The reason we granted the variance was because the slope made the buildable area impractical. That's not a self-imposed condition. So those are my comments.
Commissioner Scherer.
This is a tough issue. This is, really a comprehensive plan reference to maintaining the integrity of neighborhoods versus economic and subdevelopment kinds of issues. As I mentioned before, I'm pretty intimately familiar with this neighborhood. I can picture every house on that block. And I have some miscellaneous concerns. I am concerned with the floodplain issue because I've watched what happens when we have large storms in that neighborhood. I also am very concerned about the driveway locations. This is a tough corner. It's not a typical corner, as you can see on the drawings. It's a funny little almost peninsula. It is difficult to see around that corner when you're driving from, particularly going to the north. And I look at the positioning of the driveways, and I do think that's a disaster waiting to happen. That concerns me a lot, regardless of what building pads are utilized. I resonate a lot, though, with the discussion that several people have had tonight, Commissioner Fisher, Commissioner Potts, several of the people who spoke from the audience, with the fact that while it's a well-intended part of our code in terms of notification and in terms of preserving neighborhoods, we can have unusual situations where it doesn't do that. And I feel like this is one where it doesn't. And I would like to think that we as a group can take those sorts of things into consideration, build that into our decision-making ability here. And as a result, at least in the current drawings, the way I look at this, those, I believe, I counted 18, somebody in the audience said 17 lots that are included in the calculation that are really in the St. Albans edition or the Valley Estates editions are not at all consistent with the Indian Hills neighborhood or development plan. And when I look at those, if I can accept Mr. Keene's analysis, the square footage that's remaining, I did not do the calculation myself, Mr. Keene, wouldn't allow for this subdivision, which I don't find I find our ability to make a decision like that, within our realm. I don't necessarily agree that we have no choice. So I'm leaning towards voting no in the current configuration for those reasons.
Thank you. Commissioner Schroeder.
Planner Teague, I have a question. Does our ordinance specify that factors like lot area constitute essential character of a neighborhood? Is it specified that that is the factor, or things like lot width, lot depth, setback establish the character, or are there other factors that the ordinance allows to be considered, or is our ordinance silent on both sides?
It's silent. There's no definition of neighborhood character.
Well, then then with that answered, I guess I'd suggest that we keep focusing on this 500-foot circle and the quantifiable way that we get to neighborhood character. It doesn't work here because we're looking at a neighborhood that's established by wooded slopes and steep wooded slopes at that. And I think those factors are intrinsic to the patterns of Indian Hills. And when we start removing large amounts of trees to move homes closer to the road, when we start to flatten out sites that have been established as steeply sloping lots from the very beginning, I think we are changing the essential character of the neighborhood, and that is one of the factors we have to consider in granting a variance.
Did you have anything? Commissioner Forrest.
You had to ask. We're over here doing the math.
Didn't want to miss you.
Yeah, sure. It is a complicated thing, and I honestly have been going back and forth during this meeting. I came in with some pretty strong opinions, looking at the dividing line with that ridge, and it's a public hearing. We're supposed to keep our minds open throughout this thing, so you'll probably see that once in a while going back and forth. Here's where I'm kind of floating. I agree that neighborhood character it's not defined anywhere in our code or in even state statutes, even though we're supposed to consider it with variances, so that's kind of a frustrating thing for us on more than one occasion. We talk about, being able to maximize monetary value of a lot, and yes, people want to be able to maintain their investment, and yet the other side of that is the other motives of an owner are the love of their neighborhood and establishing their sense of place. That also increases value to a property because that's why people want to move into a neighborhood, stay in a neighborhood. That's why we have this whole thing about maintaining character of neighborhood, is because people want to have that sense of place. So it's very kind of ethereal, but that is another side of it. There's a different value than just the monetary value. However, I'm not going to say that there's just pecuniary interest in this either. I think that Mr. Buson's given a lot of thought to how he wants to proceed with this, and he's made some compromises as well. One of those is by bringing that house down closer to the road, and again, I'm not close enough to this, even though I've studied it here, to really identify how strongly I am feeling on each side of this, but by bringing it closer to the road, it does overall lower the height of the building as far as its potential to be more imposing looking over the things. That they may or may not be the case in this particular lot, but in general, it's not this high thing on a high hill. So, there may be a flip side to that too. I'm also concerned about the water. Currently, we don't allow a change in drainage onto a neighbor's yard as a result of our building. I believe that's part of what's been discussed recently, the newer ordinance. So that would all be part of it. And this new home, if it's built lower like that, it may face some of the same issues, water issues that the neighbor is experiencing. I'm not sure if that conservation easement on the perimeter really will meet the goals that it's intended to. But then I'll get back to this whole thing about the subdivision and the variance. I think that the subdivision, I came in very strongly against it because of the split in the neighborhoods, the fact that we're including lots in other developments in that. I'm not as strong on that right now because there is some variation. We have medians because there are highs and lows. So it's not incredibly outside of those norms. I think buildability is an issue. However, we can't say that just because the lot is steep, and we've considered that before, we don't use precedents when we consider variances, and that I think that, the legislative intent of the whole 500-foot thing is to maintain character neighborhoods. So I'm kind of flipping back on that. The other thing is with variances, we can impose conditions if they can be imposed if they're rationally related to the situation that's being developed as a result of granting the variance. That may be another direction that people want to look at. They may want to consider, or the council may want to consider driveway placement or something like that as well. So I'm still kind of riding the fence on this. I think it would be, ideally, I would like to see, I can't super strongly say I'm totally against it, but I would really like to see some, if it goes forward, some creativity to try to really address these things with creative design, I guess. Just come up with things. And I know you've worked really hard at this already, but if that's the reason that the variance is being considered as something that we don't want to go forward with, then sometimes there's an ability to work together and come up with a compromise as well. So those are my issues. The nature of variance is the nature of the intent of the 500-foot rule, and then the fact that there's some aesthetic and structural things that point in both directions. So I agree with them.
Commissioner Fisher.
Just a couple last points. I think we talked about profit motive. It's interesting if you think about the original developer who created Indian Hills had a profit motive. And even with that profit motive, decided to keep one lot here. And when I drove up to this lot and drove up on the lot today, I'm an architect. I look at lots a lot, and it looks like it's made for one structure. And it's got a plateau, and it's kind of perfect for that, and those low areas serve a purpose in this neighborhood. And somebody made that decision, and I think it was actually a pretty good decision at the time. Mm-hmm. Now, I understand we have current rules that might allow that thing to be subdivided, and I worry about that because that's what our rules say. But to me, this is about character of a neighborhood, and anytime we're asked to approve a variance, it comes back to are we going to alter the character of this neighborhood if we grant this variance? And I would say absolutely yes. And I would say that we alter neighborhoods one lot, one parcel at a time. And if we just chip away, that's the ultimate outcome. Now, on the positive side, I have my little ledger, what's good, what's bad. On the positive side, we have a builder here who I put in a really good category. I think he's a very conscientious person. I think would do as good a job as you could possibly do in this situation. He's proposing some things that would be beneficial. However, I feel in the big picture we have to stick with, do we believe, is the character going to change? I would say yes. I think there's a risk here. There's a risk that somebody comes along that isn't as conscientious and attempts to do this, and maybe we have a worse situation, but I'm going to gamble and say that right now, with what's in front of us, it will alter the character, and I can't vote for that.
Commissioner Grable.
Mr. Chairman, it seems to me that right now the presumed question, I'll put it that way, is the combination of a subdivision and a variance. And because the combination is that way, the commission has the ability to agree with Mr. Busen with the conditions that he has suggested, i.e. the conservation issue, the height issue, well, those are the main ones, the two conservation easements and the height limitation on the house. If the proposal was split, so the first question was, do we subdivide? And the second question was, do we grant a variance on the second lot? All of those considerations go out the window. I mean, he's pretty much entitled to do the subdivision. Whether or not we granted an easement on lot number 2, variance. whether or not we granted a variance on lot number 2, we could impose some conditions perhaps on lot number 2 concerning some of the conservation, but not the entire conservation area. So it seems to me, and based on what Commissioner Fisher has said about the integrity of Mr. Buston and the quality of his work, it seems to me that we don't want to separate these because we've got an opportunity to create 2 lots here and create some really good conditions, I think, for the neighborhood.
I think it's interesting you bring that up. I think that this is 2 questions. It's one application, but it's 2 questions, and because it's 2 questions, really drives the way I think about it. The subdivision, it seems to me, I understand the character issue that we're wrestling with, and that I agree with my colleagues on, really is related to the subdivision. And it is not part of our legal analysis on the subdivision. I agree with Commissioner Grable that regardless of whether the spirit of the ordinance is being given effect by this, we have a pretty clear rule that says you take the median of the 500-foot radius, and if the lots are big enough, they satisfy that, and we're required to give a subdivision. So if I were being asked about a variance without the subdivision, I feel differently. But then once I get to the place where I feel like I have to grant a subdivision, and I would say, with respect to Mr. Evinger's comments, we are a recommending body, and if the city attorney wants to advise the city council that we aren't compelled to grant a subdivision under these circumstances, that would be fine with me. I'm not anxious to grant a subdivision in this case, but I feel like we're compelled to do that. Then the question for me becomes, once you've subdivided the property, the character question is whether the character of the neighborhood is more satisfied and more preserved by building closer to the street without being up into the more steep ground. And my take on that, because I think the other elements are satisfied, is that the character is more consistent with the neighborhood if you grant the variance. So, although I'm not fond of the idea of granting the subdivision, I don't see any alternative. And once the subdivision is granted, I think the variance is the better way to build this out. So, other comments? Commissioner Platter.
Kerry, I have a question. So if this was just a subdivision, what path would it take? If there wasn't a variance involved, would this be on the consent agenda?
No.
The subdivision?
It would be a preliminary plat, no variances.
But it would have
Same
come to
path. You'd be making a recommendation.
It does come here, though.
Yeah.
It does.
Right. Okay.
And then the council makes a decision.
And again, by our code, let's just black and white. It's never black and white, but black and white, it meets the requirements, right?
The subdivision does, correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Forrest.
Just to follow up, so the only thing that we're to consider at all in granting or recommending a subdivision is lot area size?
No.
The variance that's being considered
No,
is for
I'm
lot-
saying in
No,
general,
the
for a
subdivision.
subdivision, just a subdivision. What are the criteria to consider for a subdivision other than lot area size?
Lot area, lot width, lot depth.
So it's just those numbers. So there's nothing about the physical aspects or location or shape of the road or anything that comes into play with subdivisions at all?
There's that steep slope ordinance that we talked about, the 18% slopes. You can't impact more than 25% of those, which they would have to comply with in this case, and can.
Okay.
There's no floodplain on the property, 100-year floodplain. There could be, certainly.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Carrie, does our comprehensive plan influence subdivision at all by suggesting we need to have alignment of subdivisions with the policies of our comprehensive plan?
Boy, the comprehensive plan wouldn't trump a zoning ordinance that that meets code, or a proposal that meets code. There might be some, I can't think of any off the top of my head, language that talks about subdivisions in the comprehensive plan.
Preservation of neighborhood character or anything like that in our...
There is some of that language, certainly.
So, we have yet another agenda item after this one. I think we've talked this one pretty well out. Does somebody care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Grable.
I'll make a motion so that we can preserve the conditions that have been suggested. I will make a motion that we approve the subdivision request and the variance. I said variance. Subject to the conditions, the conservation easement, which will be subject to approval of the city forester and removal of the buckthorn, approval of 9 Mile Creek for the drainage, the approval of a curb cut, the grade and design approval, and the height maximum on the second lot to 35 feet. And all of the other conditions and specifications listed in the staff report.
Is there a second? Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the subdivision.
Is there a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Is there another motion? You might be out of ammunition, Mr. Grable. Commissioner Schroeder.
I have a question for Carrie. Carrie, if the Planning Commission takes no action, what are Mr. Buson's options? He can just wait until the time runs out, can't he?
Well, we'll take an action. So, and we've gone around this tree before, where we'll have a motion here eventually, and whether the motion fails or the motion succeeds, that ends up being our recommendation to the council, and then the council will make a decision. You know, the one footnote to Commissioner Grable's comment is I don't think at this point it doesn't appear that there's a risk of a vote in favor of a variance, but this certainly seems like one that would have to go to the council in any event, and I don't know if that's what you're intending.
It would go to the city council.
All right.
Correct. We have to take action within 60 days to 120, or the project is automatically approved.
On both issues, on both the
Correct.
subdivision
Right.
and right.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Mr. Chair, I would recommend that we recommend that the city council deny the proposed subdivision and the variance for 6609 Blackfoot Pass. Based on the findings that I'll propose, that the subdivision and the requested variance would alter the essential character of the neighborhood by modifying steep slopes and steep wooded slopes, and essentially rendering this lot out of character with the rest of the Indian Hills neighborhood.
Is there a second? There's been a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Commissioner Grable.
I could not support the motion on the subdivision because that's not within the legal realm of our responsibilities. It's an extra legal motion. It's got no meaning.
Commissioner Fisher.
No, I better not say it. I just feel like I can get by with it because I'm not an attorney. That's all I'm going to say.
First thing we do. Commissioner Schroeder.
Mr. Chair, I made a motion. I don't know whether it's legal or not, but that'll be up to the city's legal counsel to define.
So, hearing no further discussion, Commissioner Grable.
Then what's the point?
We're offering a recommendation of the city council. We're not approving or denying this. We're making a recommendation of the city council, and the city council has other resources at their disposal to help answer these kind of questions that we don't have here tonight.
Then I would say again, what's the point? We can't willy-nilly decide yes or no on something just because we got some idea in our head that we think it's good or bad. We ought to be bound by some kind of standard, and to take that kind of motion ignores the standard. And I say, rhetorically, if nothing else, what's the point of the Planning Commission then?
Commissioner Forrest.
I think that this is unique in that we're combining the subdivision and the variance together. Otherwise, we could yay or nay on the variance, and then either party could, on the variance alone, we could do that, or we could, and then either party would have an appeal right. And I think Planner Teague has a comment too.
Mr. Teague.
Can I just finish it a little bit?
By all
the other
means.
thing is, in addition to sending recommendation to the council one way or the other, we are highlighting a lot of issues that then they can flesh out further, or we're pointing out things they may not have considered at the same time. So it's serving a purpose. There is some point to it.
Mr. Teague.
If I may, we do have a provision in the subdivision ordinance that I think is getting at where you're going with this motion. We can have the city attorney comment on it at the city council, but one of the guidelines or criteria is that you're supposed to consider as part of a subdivision is the consistency of a proposed plat or subdivision and proposed development in compliance by the proposed plat or subdivision and the proposed development plan with the policies, objectives, and goals of the comprehensive plan. And you referred to the neighborhood character, preserving neighborhood character that the comprehensive plan does talk about. So that could be the basis for your recommendation.
Further discussion? Jackie, let's do a roll call vote.
Yes. Commissioner Scheer? All right, an aye vote is supporting the denial. Aye. Commissioner Schroeder?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Platt?
Aye.
Commissioner Forrest?
Aye.
Commissioner Grable?
Nay.
Chair Stotton?
Nay. The motion prevails. The recommendation to the council will be for a denial of the subdivision and the variance. Thank you to everybody who commented on the issue, and thank you to the applicant for his comments. If people could move with some speed to exit the room as you debrief on this issue, I'd appreciate it. We have another agenda item that people have been waiting for quite some time to consider. All right. Next up is agenda item 6C. It's a preliminary plat. John Adams on behalf of Ted E. Warner, number 5 Merrill Lane, Edina, Minnesota. Carrie, are you introducing this one?
Okay. This next proposal, somewhat similar to our last one, only there's no variances requested for this subdivision. So this is a preliminary plat of 5 Mary Lane, located up in the Rolling Green neighborhood just south of Meadowbrook Golf Course, east of Interlochen. You see the property highlighted on the screen. This is an oversized parcel compared to the neighborhood with the exception of the large 15-acre property located here. This is 3.5 acres in size. Currently there's a single-family home on the property. There is rolling topography on this site. There's no steep slopes or significant areas of steep slopes on this property like we looked at the last project. Again, the median is established by that 500-foot radius, and based on that median, minimum lot size here is just over 48,000 square feet, so over an acre in size. An acre is 43,560 square feet. minimum lot width, 192 feet, and depth, 277. So all three of the proposed lots here exceed the lot area median, lot width, and lot depth. So again, no variances requested. So this is a look at the property. Again, the existing house located in the middle of the property would remain, and 2 new homes could be built on lots 1 and 3 as proposed. The areas highlighted here in red would be the buildable area. The front yard setback is established a little bit different on this property. It's established by the average of the 2 homes on either side. So the front yard setback requirement for lot 1 is established by the average of the existing home here and to the south. So this dashed line represents the front yard setback. So the same would go for the lot to the south. So the request before the Planning Commission is a subdivision to create 3 lots out of the 1 existing property. Primary issue is this proposed plat reasonable for the site. So again, staff believes that this project proposal is reasonable. Again, it meets all of our minimum lot area requirements, area width and depth. The building pads here, while they may seem somewhat small compared to the lot, they are over 5,000 square feet. So they are pretty good size for a building pad. The applicant has suggested driveway locations for the lot 3. The existing driveway would be utilized. A new driveway would be cut in on lot 2, and they've located them so as to avoid some of the more significant trees on the site. Same would go for lot 1. So because the property meets all of our minimum zoning ordinance requirements, staff is recommending approval of the project subject to the conditions, and so those conditions would include again, review by the watershed district and any any suggestions or requirements that they may have. Prior to a building permit, curb cut permits would be required for the 2 new curb cuts. Specific grading and drainage plans, again, would be reviewed by the city engineer at that time. So, construction management plans would also be required for each lot. So with that, staff is recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions in your staff report, and I can stand for questions.
Any questions for Mr. Teague? Thank you, Carrie. Is the applicant present? Come on up, introduce yourself.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. My name is John Adams. I'm with Caldwell Banker Burnett.
Welcome, Mr. Adams.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce the rest of our team. We got Ted Warner, one of the property owners. Mark Gromberg is our surveyor, land planner. Charlie Carpenter with Fabianski, Westra, Hart, and Thompson is our attorney. The Warners hired me to sell their property, provide expertise with my 37 years of experience. Our goal was to come up with a plan that fit the look and the feel of the neighborhood and at the same time optimize the value of the property for the Warner family. We reviewed the city ordinances with city staff and Mark Gromberg to come up with viable alternatives. I recommended to the Warners a 3-lot layout which fits all of the requirements of the ordinance and we consider to be the best use of the property. Our proposed plat conforms to the city subdivision and zoning ordinances. At this time, we think the house will stay on the middle lot. However, Warners are under contract with John Kramer and Sons for the sale of that lot as well as proposed lot 1. Both contracts are contingent on receiving subdivision approval from the city. So what ultimately happens on proposed lot 2 will be up to Gary Kramer and his client. The building envelopes on proposed lots 1 and 3 were established by applying the setback requirements in the ordinance. We would expect utilities and driveways to come in off Merrill Lane. We would anticipate very little tree removal. There will be some around the building pad and driveway, but we will make every effort to save as many trees as possible. We would also expect a minimal amount of grading for driveways and immediately around each home. We've made every effort to work with the neighbors on both sides who are most affected by our proposed subdivision. I've had 4 or 5 meetings with Mary Polad, And Gary Kramer and I met with Sandy and Mike Gano for 2.5 hours last Friday. Gary Kramer has assured Sandy and Mike Gano that when he puts an end user buyer in place on proposed Lot 1, that he will encourage that buyer to work with the Ganos on mutually beneficial landscape screening, home placement on proposed Lot 1. We are very pleased that Kramer's involved, given his excellent reputation. We are confident that he will very capably plan the placement of homes on the lots so that they fit very nicely onto the Warner property. The existing trees and additional landscape screening will also help to gracefully blend those homes into the neighborhood. We expect once completed, the homes on the 3 lots will be a beautiful enhancement to the neighborhood. And Ted Warner's going to come up and say a few words.
I am part of the process for applying for the subdivision. I grew up in Edina, went to Wooddale Highlands grade schools, both Southview and Valley View middle schools, graduated from Edina. I've lived in Edina almost my whole life. My 3 children went through the Edina school systems and all graduated from Edina. The families lived at 5 Merrill Lane for over 46 years, and in the Interlochen Boulevard neighborhood for over 60 years. My Uncle Frank Warner even lived on Bywood in the same area of Rolling Green. So I have Edina in my blood and also have an excellent feel for the history of the neighborhood and take this subdivision very seriously. When we first moved to 5 Merrill Lane, there were all the land around the bend, I guess we don't have that up anymore, was all undeveloped at that point. So since we've moved in, we've watched the changes occur in the neighborhood from development to tearing down of current houses and making room for larger houses or extremely large houses. And through all of this evolution, what we've always accepted the changes and have relied on the commission and the council to ensure proper orderly standards for the development through the ordinances. My mother passed away in June, but she had been in Friendship Village for quite a while before that. So this proposed subdivision is not a rash one. We've been working on trying to figure out a way to do this for quite a while. We ultimately have tried to come up with a plan that can fit the neighborhood and maintain its feel. I understand that there are neighbors opposed to this for various reasons, but I feel the lot sizes and subdivision standards are being met and that the codes protect the lots from being too squeezed in. In engaging John Adams and Mark Gronberg, as well as working with a very reputable builder such as Gary Kramer, who is doing work or has done work in the area before, we feel we've come up with a final product that will have 3 large lots of trees, landscaping, to help separate and screen the new houses from each other, their neighbors, and the road. Most importantly, we do not feel that the proposed homes will hurt the look or feel of the neighborhood. Our goal has been to maintain the feel of the neighborhood as best we can, and with careful planning, I hope and expect that our property will return a majestic feel, largely treed with long driveways placed and homes gracefully placed from the road, very similar to what it is now. And we have looked at all the options available, and I guess I'm here to say that I have been a part of that neighborhood for a long time and feel that this will keep the neighborhood the way it should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Any questions for the applicants? Commissioner Scherer.
Just to clarify a point, Mr. Adams, you were referring to or the builder, Kramer. And you referred to lots 1 and 2, but you didn't say anything about lot 3.
Lot 3 is not under contract.
Mr. Adams, could you come up because we can't get you on the microphone from there? Thank you.
Lot 3 is currently not under contract with anybody. The Warners still own Lot 3, or proposed Lot 3, if the subdivision were approved.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Grable.
Yes, Mr. Warner, a question for you. I drove by there this morning, or this afternoon, and what impressed me as I was driving around that curve was that entire area facing the street is heavily wooded. And as I review your proposal, it seems to me that you propose to keep those woods along the street. Is that correct? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, that's correct.
Further questions for the applicants? All right, hearing none, this is a public hearing, and so at this time I'm going to open the public hearing and invite comments from the public on this application. All of you who are here saw the last go-around, so you know the ground rules. The number of times a comment is repeated won't have any greater impact. We're listening very carefully, and we appreciate your patience in waiting as long as you've had to wait to have your say on this. So come on up and state your name and address. And
Sure. Hello, my name is Mike Gano. I live at 6 Mary Lane with my wife, Sandy, and our family. We're immediately next door to the Warner property, and I appreciate this opportunity to be heard this evening. We moved here to Rolling Green last December after an extensive search of real estate through the Minneapolis area, and we were especially drawn to Rolling Green with its large lots and generally spacious feeling. We appreciated the space between the houses, the beautiful trees, the density, the privacy, and the quality of life that it would offer. We chose our house because it's at the end of a quiet street, up on a hill surrounded by trees. We're here tonight to express our deep concern regarding the proximity of the 3 large houses proposed to be built on the Warner property. To be clear, we are not opposed to the subdivision of the parcel, but to the number of lots and the location of the proposed homes. Specifically, we'd prefer 2 lots, not 3. The proposal crams 3 homes to the back of each lot, which you saw in the picture earlier, which does not give us the sense of the location as we bought into the neighborhood, and we're asking that the Planning Commission carefully consider the ramifications to the neighbors and adjacent property values if this subdivision is approved as it is currently proposed. Though on the surface it does seem possible to meet the minimum setback requirements for 3 lots, it might not meet the City Council's mission, and I quote, of protecting and preserving the original intent of the neighborhood, unquote, as stated in the Edina Comprehensive Plan. Nor does it meet the community design guidelines of this plan where, again, I quote, the private sector is encouraged to design buildings, structures, and landscape features that complement and support the public realm and fit within the context of the surrounding neighborhood. It was never intended for Rolling Green to become a high-density neighborhood. I ask that you please come by and walk this property, and I hear some of you may have already done that, as we look to see and feel it for yourselves. The division of this property into 3 lots makes the placement of the homes very tough. In fact, all 3 homes as presented in the preliminary plat as issued by the planning office shows that each home is at the minimum side setback, which will be extremely tight given the size of each home as proposed, and we believe will take away from the intent of the home sites in Rolling Green. As another neighbor has pointed out in his letter to Mr. Teague, the density of this proposal is without precedent in Rolling Green. This proposal posed an interesting question: how will the Commission respond when another very large parcel makes its way to the market? I'm referring to the Treasure Hills property. Are we going to have another scenario of numerous homes, each 10 feet off their side setback, lined up along Mary Lane? If so, such an example could add more than 10 homes on a single home site. High density is not why families buy in Rolling Green, and is certainly not what keeps the home values as they are. There are plenty of neighborhoods in Edina that fit the bill if you're looking for close proximity. Rolling Green has never been one of them. So if this proposal is approved as presented, the Commission saying that any multi-acre home site can be subdivided without consideration to existing home values and personal investment? If so, then the beauty and character of Rolling Green will likely change, and some will likely see their property values erode. So there are several other neighbors who have pointed out issues that should be addressed. One is around road safety, which is look at the narrowing of the road with the additional driveways. Is the Minnehaha watershed going to be impacted? Should DNR be looking at runoff as the home that's being built across the street had to invest extra money in a drainage? And how will these new homes enjoy their backyards given their placement? Are we going to see swimming pools and swing sets in the front yards because there's no place for a family or children to enjoy the property? So thank you for your consideration. We trust that you'll take the time necessary to fully understand and appreciate the impact this decision will make. And I agree with Commissioner Fisher's comment. Be careful about altering the character of neighborhoods. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Mr. Sheener. Other comments?
Good evening
As
again.
promised, you return.
I promised. Good evening. And I want to thank you all for, I learned a lot during that last one. And the questions you asked and the concerns that you've expressed. I am actually kind of impressed that you're taking this care. And I do think that you have this discretion not to use the 500 number or these numbers. That's what you're given. But you also have to maintain the overall standards of the community. And Section 850 is your guiding principle that tells you to look at the integrity of the neighborhoods. It tells you that because you have the authority to act on that. Now, I am a little bit confused with this 10-foot setback. If you saw that diagram, those homes are virtually right up against the other two lots. We heard in the prior discussion, someone said they agreed to a 45-foot or 35-foot minimum or whatever it was. Okay? And it's my understanding that if you go over that height, you have to add a half foot for every foot. Correct? So this current plat must be taking into account a house height of the lowest possible level. We don't know anything about that yet, but if it's going to be over that minimum, then we have to have a setback of half a foot for every foot. And we apparently aren't there yet. We would be happy to work with the Edina City Attorney to determine what type of opinions would be necessary and appropriate to help in our community. I think you're all seeing that those of us in Rolling Green, and I know you have a lot of letters in your files, really care about Rolling Green. You'd expect that. Most of us are business people. We know the value of money. We know that the Warners have a valuable lot. We want them to enjoy it. We want them to get the value of their lot. But we also worry about the effect of this on our property prices. And by creating this 3-lot situation with homes abutted right up against the other homeowners. The previous speaker mentioned something that I really want you to take to heart. What is next? What is next in Rolling Green? Maybe we need to sit back and do a further analysis, because how many subdivided lots can theoretically be made out of Rolling Green right now? 7 more? 10 more? 20 more? 30 more? How many of those lots can be subdivided if you do it and reduce the lowest common denominator each time? What will Rolling Green look like? Someone should look at that before we start making major subdivisions in Rolling Green, because you're talking about a whole lot of money here and a whole lot of people who are affected. So I would urge you to do a real thorough analysis of the various properties throughout Rolling Green. I think there are 60 some. Would it become 80, 90?
Okay.
What? Take a look, please.
Thank you,
because
Mr.
we're
Ellinger.
concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Hi, my name is James Ganley. I live on 4704 Mary Lane Avenue. I'm the house directly across the street from the Warner property, or one of them, at the end of the existing driveway. I'd just like to note that there are many, many people from our neighborhood in the audience tonight, and they may not choose to speak because of other things that people have already said. But in case this does get to transcript, there are a lot of people represented here tonight protecting the interests of the existing homeowners, and I wouldn't want that to get lost in the absence of transcript. The first thing I'd like to say is I'm disappointed that Mr. Kramer isn't here, since he's going to be the one purchasing the lots and altering the lots, and we're here as homeowners, existing homeowners, and the people living in the neighborhood, yet we don't have a very detailed plan as to what's going to happen to these lots. We were told we should trust Mr. Kramer's business judgment in the past and his history as to give us comfort. Well, it would be really helpful if he was actually here and the plans for the property were actually descriptive enough for us to tell what it is we're actually looking at. As it was mentioned before, there are no backyards. These are very large lots, 5,000 square foot plots, very adjacent to one another, up on a hill. You know, as the person that drives out of his driveway and looks up the hill every day, I'm afraid I'm going to be looking at a city on a hill, right? And that is not the rolling green properties that we're used to seeing. That's not the character of the neighborhood. You know, the odd configuration worries us. It is an odd configuration to have no backyard. That's just an odd configuration, and that can impact that, you know, the housing, the feel of the neighborhood, and therefore, you know, house values in that neighborhood. So with that, I think many of the other issues have been covered already, and that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Ganley.
My name is Mike Callan. I live on at 10 Merrill Lane. My wife and I and our family have lived there for about 27 years. And we've seen a lot of change in that neighborhood, obviously. And I certainly, and I think many of our neighbors, are not adverse to any change. The problem with this proposed subdivision is when you go to 3 lots instead of 2, and you put all those homes up on that hill together, you end up with 5 large homes all in one place, all so close, with close proximity. And that raises a significant character of the neighborhood issue. And I know there was discussion earlier about whether in the case of just a subdivision issue, the Planning Commission is constrained to not consider character of the neighborhood. I don't believe that to be true. And I know the city attorney can resolve that, but if you look at 810, just looking at the language there, the commission in reviewing proposed subdivisions, it says specifically here, is instructed as a consideration to consider the impact on the character of the neighborhood, the suitability of the shape of the lots, the compatibility and arrangement of the lots in the context of the neighborhood. So I fully agree with some of the other members of the commission who were concerned about that in the last matter that you considered, and I would strongly urge you to consider it again in the context of this one and reject the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callan. Other comments?
Good evening. My name is Mary Ingebrand Polad, and I don't really have anything too compelling to say that hasn't been said before, but I feel that because I live right next door to the Warners, I wanted to introduce myself and tell you I appreciate the Warners giving me first right of refusal on the property, but I already have 2 acres and a home in which I've lived for 22 years. I want to also tell you that it was suggested by Mr. Adams to me that I purchase Lot 3 as a buffer for what's going to go in if there are 3 houses there, and that would further enhance the value of what I currently own. I really am not interested in another $1.5 million to protect what I currently own. I just can't do it. But that was an inference to me that all these houses without backyards crammed right on top of my driveway, because 10 feet isn't very much, is not going to be too desirable. So I understand wanting to maximize your monetary investment in a lot, but I would strongly encourage you to consider 2 instead of 3. 3 is just, they're pie-shaped lots. It's a hilltop lot, and I know some of you have been up there. And the thought that any kind of heavy equipment, building equipment, I know I built 4 houses. Any kind of equipment to build on top of that hilltop lot with these pie-shaped divisions requires heavy machinery and tons of trees. Beautiful mature trees will come down. There's no denying that. So I was inspired by the decision you made on the last case, and my faith was really, you instilled a lot of faith in me in your ability to make good decisions. So I hope you'll consider again the integrity of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Polak. Other comments?
Yeah, hi, I'm Charlie Carpenter, and I am an attorney working with the Warners.
Welcome, Mr. Carpenter.
Thank you
It's
very
a good
much.
night for attorneys.
Well, seemingly so. But anyway, just a couple of thoughts as I'm listening to some of the comments from the public hearing, and some of which have already been expressed by Ted Warner and John, but perhaps need just a little bit more emphasis, and that is to start that we think that this 3-lot subdivision instead of a 2-lot or not a subdivision at all does make sense. The consideration was given to not subdividing at all, and Ted Warner's concern was that if he were to sell it as a single lot, the result would be that somebody would come in and purchase it and put up a gigantic home. And he felt that that, more than anything, would detract from the character of the neighborhood, and certainly would not be something that his mother would want to see in place of her old home. But so they thought about no subdivision. They also thought about subdividing the property into 2. And the concerns there were several. One was that logically we'd split the property in half, which would necessitate taking down the existing home, as a home can't straddle 2 legally subdivided lots. But the Warners felt that there is value in that home, and in addition thought that by preserving it and adding a 3rd lot, they would also give themselves the opportunity for one of them to stay in the neighborhood. That's the 3rd lot is not under contract to be sold to the Kramer builder, and instead might end up becoming, however you want to put it, but a home for the Warner kids, if you will, to relocate back into the neighborhood. So they thought that felt that that's an additional reason for going with the 3-lot subdivision. And I guess thirdly is, again, with an eye toward maintaining the character of the home and recognizing that, if there were no subdivision and a single lot were preserved, the potential for a very large home to come in would be something they wanted to avoid. Somewhat similarly, if we were to split it into 2 lots, there's a reasonable likelihood that, again, there would be 2 very large homes on those 2 lots. And I'm not sure that there's a great distinction between the 1 very large home, the 2 large homes, and 3 perhaps more modestly sized homes as far as massing. Ted Warner's belief is that by breaking it into somewhat smaller parcels, it would help heighten the likelihood that we would put in an ultimate user would ultimately build somewhat more modest homes. It seems as though some of the people reacting look at the building envelopes that are drawn onto the proposed plat and take those to be the actual home and that's not the case. What's to be shown on a preliminary plat is what's permissible, what's the maximum scope of the location on a lot where a home can be built, and it doesn't dictate that we have to, or an ultimate user would put a home on that large. So Ted's thought was, hopefully we're going to end up with 3, maybe perhaps more modestly sized homes set back off the road like other homes and lots in nearby, at least in Rolling Green, are, heavily treed in front, long winding driveways and so on. So the long and short of it is we don't think this is so inconsistent, and certainly, the massing that is feared can be minimized by screening, and again that the focus is on this 10-foot setback.
Mr. Carpenter, I'm going to ask you just to wrap up. We're still kind of in the public hearing portion of this.
Okay, I thought
my
people were
clock has been
concluded with
malfunctioning
that.
on me.
Yeah,
so
no, that's fine. I had taken it that there were no further
But I think
comments,
I get your point. And, I think you're circling back to the same points you've been making.
Yeah, the long and short is that we think that it's not inconsistent with, and moreover, we're following the rules that are prescribed, which do count.
Fair enough. Further comments?
Yes, I'll be short. Sandy Gano, 6 Mary Lane. I just find it interesting that 3 lots are better than 2, and that 3 homes, which will be almost to the property line, with hardly any room for screening, is somehow better than 2 lots or 2 houses that are more spread apart and able to get off the setback lines. And I understand John explained to me that 2 houses, if the main house comes down, might force the other 2 houses back slightly, but perhaps we could do something about that later if the houses were in a more comfortable setting and able to better fit on the lot. Quite honestly, I don't really see a big difference between 3 5,000 plus square foot building pads crammed together at the top of the hill, then Mary Polad and me all stuck at the top of the hill. How's that different than one big house, which maybe might not spread completely to the edge of the property lines and might at least have a little bit of room around it for some landscaping? I don't know how we're going to get any kind of screening of any sort when the house that's supposedly going up on lot one, which I think is next to us, is literally on the other side of my hedge line. I mean, I staked it, and the view of the house is out my main picture window, out of my front door, from my porch. That's all I will see. And there's a hedge line, and then 10 feet, and that is where the wall of the house will be. No one builds modest houses that I've seen in Rolling Green since we've been here, so I think that's a little bit optimistic or convenient as a motivation for the 3 lots. I think from the neighbors I've spoken to, most of them would be well behind 2. And it just seems like 3 is only a means to just put as many on there as possible with no regard to what that does to our value, and if we can resell it at some point or have a lot of people totally uninterested in purchasing our property because we are so on top of the neighbors with all of this land sitting in front of them. Might look, interesting to come up a long driveway, but when you get to the top, which house are you going to? Because they're all so close together. So yes, they meet criteria. We understand that, and we understand they want to be able to sell their property. Totally understandable. But we feel like we deserve equal consideration as immediate homeowners. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Pat Maloney, and I live at 5804 Mate Lane. I don't want to repeat the comments you've heard before, so I'll limit myself to really one point. This would totally change the character of the neighborhood. There's no other place in Rolling Green where you have houses this close together. The beauty of the neighborhood is the spaciousness and privacy that the current lots allow. Putting 3 houses crammed at the top of that hill, they'll be adjacent to the 2 on each side of it. It will simply change the character of the neighborhood, and I believe you have the discretion to deny the request on that basis alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney. Anyone else who hasn't had a chance to speak who'd like to do so? All right, seeing no further comments, well, we may... Sure, come on up, Mr. Adams.
I'd like to read just one paragraph from a letter that I received from one of the neighbors, and I think many of the neighbors received it, and he's out of town and couldn't be here, but he says, I would suggest another option is to make an accommodation to the house locations for the 3 subdivided lots and let the 3 lots be built closer to the street, thus providing more privacy for the 2 existing neighbors on each side of the Warner property, as well as for each of the 3 new houses. Building the houses somewhat closer to the street gives the houses more of a backyard. The front of the houses could maintain the heavily wooded look, thereby preserving the Rolling Green brand and look for this area of our beautiful neighborhood. Maybe if we get 3 new families moved into Rolling Green, we could have a much more fun holiday party. That was written by a neighbor.
Apparently the Warners are
we
not
are
enough fun at the party.
We are restricted by the ordinances for the front yard setback, and he's making a very good point here. We have not applied for a variance to those front yard setbacks at this point because we don't know where the end users are going to want to place the homes. But we've made a commitment to the neighbors that we would work with them. We'd be back to you if we felt that a variance was necessary to keep the character of the neighborhood and to satisfy the neighbors and to make it more consistent.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. Further comments? You're getting in right when the getting's good here.
One more. Mr. T, could you put up the 500-foot diagram for me, please? My name is Tom Owens. I'm a real estate lawyer in Minneapolis. I represent Mary Polad.
Welcome,
At the
Mr.
risk
Owens.
of a slight bit of redundancy, I want to cite the city code related to what we're after here, and something that is a little bit unusual in the consideration of subdivisions, which is character and symmetry of the neighborhood. But it's right there in section 810.11 of your zoning ordinance, and it specifically calls for the Commission and the City Council to consider the suitability, the size and shape of the lots in the proposed plat relative to the size and shape of the lots in the neighborhood. And can you pull that up?
We don't have they just did it. We don't have that. We don't have a lot median similar to the graphic that was provided by the last applicant. It was simply a chart that was provided.
Is there some way I can put this?
Just the 3 lots that would be created out of the large pie-sized shape, creating 3 smaller pie-sized shaped lots, would result in 3 side-by-side anomalies. There's nothing like those lot shapes in this neighborhood, and we're defining neighborhood just as is defined in the code within this 500-foot radius. So it's creating something clearly, totally out of character, and that's the end of my remarks. Thank you.
What about the ones at the corner?
Excuse me?
Right there on Anaway and, what is that, 16?
Well, right. There's 1 out of 33.
Pie-shaped lots.
1 out of 33.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Owens. Additional comments? Anybody who hasn't had a chance to chime in on this who'd like to?
Good evening. My name's Phil Brote, and I live at 4820 Rolling Green Parkway. So I'm not directly in the neighborhood, but I walk this neighborhood sometimes, ride my bike. This is a very dangerous curve. It's lucky there hasn't been an accident along Merrill Lane where it goes down right around I don't have any maps, but if you go right around the property, it's a blind curve. If you're coming the wrong way, people get hit, could easily get hit. There's kids in the neighborhood, and if you bring a couple more driveways in there and it's still blind, I think there should be a traffic study on this before you do anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Broad. Further comments? All right, seeing no further interest in comments, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, so the public hearing is closed. Mr. Teague. Mr. Owens identified, he cited some language from the code. Can you verify that language or give us some context to that?
Yes, that's some of that same language where I quoted from on the last project, where you do have some discretion. Again, I'd want our city attorney to chime in on that, whether that would stand up, because again, it's subjective. We don't have a specific definition for neighborhood character or impact and symmetry of lot size compared to the neighborhood.
Okay. Discussion or further questions to staff?
Chair Staunton.
Commissioner Fisher.
Carrie, is there a way, have you measured by chance the distance between the houses on 6 and 7 Mary Lane? And how different is the distance between those two structures to what we might be seeing here? What I'm trying to get at, I'm trying to figure out, are we creating an anomaly, or is there already a cluster of buildings at the top of this hill a little bit?
The distance between 6 and 7?
Oh.
Do you have that?
I don't.
Okay.
We just have an aerial.
It's about 100 feet.
Oh, you got it.
Thank
you. Yeah, and you're looking at the aerial property map photo in our packet.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get an idea here, because when we talk about, I think one of the
I'm sorry, Mike. Carrie, would you mind putting that aerial up just so people know what we're talking about as we're looking at this? Sorry, Mike. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. This is really interesting when you compare it to the last issue we were looking at. There, the impact to the neighborhood was along the street. It was it was a matter of what does it feel like, people going up and down the street. This one, I'm not sure anyone going up and down the street would ever know the difference, but there's definitely an impact at the top of this hill. I'm just trying to get an idea what is that impact and how does it compare to what's happening now? So are we creating a very different condition, or is it actually somewhat similar to the condition between lots 6 and 7 today? And I don't know if I have the answer for that.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Well, and that's actually where I was looking at. I was looking at it from the experience of driving along Mary Lane, and it seems to me that the process here, while it may be subdivision, it actually feels like infill. You're taking an existing home on the property and placing essentially a new home as tightly as you can between it and the neighbors at 6 and 7 Mary Lane. And to me, it is a distinct change in the character of the experience along Mary Lane. It feels like these homes become, as they're pushed to the top of the hill, pushed to the back of the lot, they kind of blend together, it would seem, and become more of a monolithic structure, which is not the character of this neighborhood.
Commissioner Grable.
I'm looking at the same map. I'm looking at the distance between 4616 and 4612. I'm looking at the distance between 47 and 5805. I'm looking at the distance between 4 and 6, 6 and 7, and 6 and 5, and what would be put there. And if you're running along Merrill Lane, what you're going to see is those woods all along the east side of the street. So I would make the case that this subdivision, if they decide to build on the buildable plats without seeking a variance, I'm arguing that the character of the neighborhood is not significantly changed. Now, we may want to argue the phases of the moon or something like that to justify our decision not to grant a subdivision, but it seems to me that you're on pretty thin grounds not to grant this subdivision.
Further discussion?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of a second. Further
Bet
discussion?
1,000.
Commissioner Scheer.
For the benefit of those watching at home, I want to sort of state the obvious, but also make sure that everybody agrees with my statement of what I think is the obvious. We've gone with 3 pie-shaped lots because, based on the city's calculation of a setback, if I look at the positioning of the current Polad and Gno homes, the only way to create 3 buildable pads on that calculation, because of how far back those 2 houses sit, is to go with this pie-shaped plat. Is that correct? Correct. Okay. It just seemed to me as I looked at it that there could have been some attractive ways to divide it into 3 lots other than the pie-shaped lots, but you then don't meet the city code for creating your pad. Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
I don't have a motion. I'm struggling, and this one is way more difficult for me than the last, the Indian Hills one. And the reason is, these are 3 buildable lots. I don't think this, there's no variance being proposed. I believe that variance that was being proposed before was to try to make a lot buildable that wasn't buildable. That situation doesn't exist here, and I'm just struggling, I don't know how I want to go with this in terms of, does it really change the character? It doesn't. I don't think it changes the character from the street, and I'm struggling to figure out how it changes the character. I haven't been in anyone's living room up there. I didn't go that deep into the lot, so it's hard to know what what that means on that side.
Further discussion? If there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion. Commissioner Scheer.
I assume there's been a lot of discussion with the neighbors. You alluded to that. In the discussion with the neighbors, did you have any discussions about, even in the 3-lot plan, asking for variances and moving those properties that you would develop forward?
Yes, we did.
Mr. Adams, why don't you come on up to the podium?
Yes, we did have those discussions. We felt that until Gary Kramer got an end-user buyer in place, Gary did commit to the Gnos in the meeting that we had with them, that he would recommend to that buyer to try to move the house down the hill. We're sitting on that lot, that proposed lot 1, we're 175 feet back from the street. The houses across the street are approximately 75 feet off the street.
I know.
The average on our side of the street is about 130. So it would work very, very well to come down to about the 130 average, and Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was the city ordinance up until about 3 years ago. And we would be building all 3 of these houses at the 130 mark, and we'd be totally in character with the neighborhood. We'd have backyards, everything would be right along like everybody else. We'd be on the average on our side of the street. We'd be significantly further off the street than across the street. And it's the right thing to do, like Glenn Bowles pointed out in his letter. And I think you all have a copy of that. So our thought process was we'd come in and ask for approval on the subdivision based on no variances, and then we would come back when we got the end user in place and try to place the houses in the appropriate places, working with the Ganoes on proposed lot 1, working with Mary Polad on proposed lot 3, which would include a screening plan. They'd be at the table with the buyer. Kramer was very, very receptive to bringing those 2 neighbors who are most affected by what we're doing into the discussion, and if it required a variance, to come back to the city and say, okay, this is our plan, this is what we're doing, and then at that point apply for the variance. When we knew what the buyer wanted, we knew exactly what the neighbor on each side was willing to go along with or not go along with, and it also gave us the chance that the house might be saved. We don't know whether it will or not, but you have to take the house down to draw a line down the middle. Plus the fact, 2-lot division puts 2 houses right in the back, and they're even further back than the 3-lot. Because your setbacks become on the lot next. If you take the house down, draw a line down the middle, your setback on the lot next to Mary Polad is 191. The setback next to Gano is 175. Currently, the 2 lots we're proposing are at 175 and 183. So the 2 houses would go back further without a variance than 3 houses. So you're not going to solve the quote-unquote cluster situation that actually was initially created by the builder of Gano's house and Polad's house building on the very backs of the lots in the first place. And we did calculate out the distance between the Gano and Polad house, and it is 80 feet. So those 2 houses are already very close together, which was created by those 2 builders who built those 2 houses on the backs of the lots. So we tried to work within the ordinance. We designed a plat that was complying with the full intention to come back once we had buyers in place, knew what they wanted to build, and I do think these lots do lend themselves to much smaller houses than a single lot or 2 lots, and that's how we did it.
One final question. The existing Warner home, which you state you may be able to save, what is its setback right now? Do you know?
176.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Public hearing's over. Further discussion? Commissioner Scheer.
I would state that 2 lots or 3, given the existing locations of the homes that are there now, I would certainly be a commissioner that would entertain variance requests for new homes, 2 lots or 3. I think the cluster of everything at the top is inconsistent with the overall neighborhood, and I believe there's an acre almost for each one of these lots. So, there's plenty of space, I believe, to maintain the curb forested feel, get backyards, and not have, country club proximity of the houses at the top of the hill in a neighborhood that doesn't look like country club at all. That would be true for me, 2 lots or 3.
there any more information anyone needs? Is there any more questions staff can answer? Any more discussion? Commissioner Potts?
Mr. Chair, I guess I would echo Commissioner Scheer's comments. Despite the fact that I voted against the previous subdivision variance combination, had that same combination come forward on this site, I could support that. I think the biggest difference are this site does not deal with this kind of severe topography that the past one did, and that makes a lot of difference for me. And I do think by relaxing the front yard setback variance for these sites, it does allow the neighborhood to get a little more space between the homes and maintain the existing character.
Commissioner Forrest.
Earlier, someone, I'm not sure if it was you, read from some text that sounded like it might be part of a neighborhood association guidelines or something. Was that? Okay, so that was a comprehensive plan. It wasn't a neighborhood design guideline or anything. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it's either got to be voted up or voted down, or else in 60 days they got their subdivision. And I'm not going to make my motion again.
Commissioner Schroeder.
I'll do it then.
Somebody has to do it.
I'm going to make a motion that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council that the subdivision be denied based on the changes to the character and symmetry of the neighborhood, in particular the patterns and relationships of the homes proximate to the subject property.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Yes, I'd like to know how.
Commissioner Grable.
I'd like to know how this is not in the character of the neighborhood when you look at the distances between 4616 and 4612, the distances between 4700 and 5805, the 80 feet between 6 and 7, the distance between 6 and 4, and the distance between 6 and 5 in the proposed homes, and the fact that the woods along Merrill Lane, which now exist, will be preserved by this subdivision.
Commissioner Schroeder.
Mr. Chair, I would offer that the patterns of homes along the, let's say, the easterly side of Merrill Lane, as it curves around to the east of the southerly side, are different than the patterns of homes that are on the opposite side of the road. I think we're talking about a neighborhood, a street that has vastly different character on each side of the road. I think that's part of the character of this neighborhood, is that it's not the same. It's not uniquely the same along both sides of these roads. It was never platted that way, and as these properties evolved, you have, in essence, more suburban-style homes along one side and more estate-style homes on the other.
So which neighborhood are we talking about? The neighborhood on the west side?
We're talking about the Rolling Green neighborhood. It's not a homogeneous aggregation of lots. It's not a homogeneous aggregation of home styles.
Then how can you say that this proposal is not in character with the neighborhood when you've just admitted that it's not a homogeneous neighborhood?
Because when I look at the homes on the easterly side of Merrill Lane, I see a different pattern, a different set of relationships between homes than I do, and even relative to the street, relative to topography. I think it's a different layout. It's a sensitively designed neighborhood from the start, where whoever it was that came in and laid the pattern of roads and lots out recognized that this neighborhood's going to be different, and different in the experience as you move through it and look at both sides of the road.
Then how is what's happening on the west side different when the housing will be at the back of the lot and the streetscape will not change? There will be no difference. There will be no difference with the streetscape.
I contend there's a basic underlying difference in the character of lots on one side of the street than on the other.
I agree. There's a difference between the lots on one side of the street and the other side of the street. But my point is, there's not going to be any significant change in the scope or the site or the scene of the lots by this subdivision.
I think there will be. I contend that placing the potential for these homes to be placed within 10 feet of the property line is different. If you look at the homes, even if you look at the spacing between the homes on the westerly side of Mare Lane, you probably have setbacks, or the setbacks aren't different, or the required setbacks aren't different, but the pattern is different. There's probably 60 or 80 feet between between adjacent homes along the opposite side of Mare Lane.
Are you arguing the opposite side of the street now, or are you arguing the back of the lot?
I'm talking about the character of the neighborhood. It's different. If you look at the spacing of homes between Lot 7 and Lot 5, it's significantly different than what there would be with an infilled home between the two.
First, I can't get you guys to talk. Now I can't get you to shut up. Is there further
That's
discussion?
not a proper motion. You can't call the question if somebody else has got discussion.
Is there further discussion? Mr. Grable. All right. Anyone else with further comment on the motion? Discussion on the motion? To repeat the motion? Jackie, did you get the motion?
Actually, denial.
Oh, denial.
Maybe I should repeat it.
Maybe you should repeat it.
How about if I'll restate it, that I recommend denial of the subdivision based on the changes to the character and symmetry of the neighborhood, and in particular, based on the changes to the patterns and relationships of the homes proximate to the subject property.
Is there further discussion? Hearing none. Commissioner Fisher.
This is really difficult. I'm going to not vote for this motion because I believe there's difference here in what we just did before, and I think the essential character of the neighborhood doesn't have to be affected here. I would be in the camp of people that would be very amenable to a variance because I think the hardship is on actually the neighbors in total if we built to the city's current setbacks.
Commissioner Scherer.
I would argue that the character of the neighborhood isn't just what you see from the street. The people who live there and what they experience is part of the character of the neighborhood as well. And the fact that we do have several homes that might be in some reasonable proximity to one another, to me, doesn't mean that you then stack three more equally close. I think that has changed the character of the neighborhood for those people as well as other people that live along the perimeter of this neighborhood in the various parts of it. This is one where, to follow kind of Commissioner Fisher's comparison vein here, this is one where I wish that variances had been proposed for some different locations within the plats. That would please me, but I don't know if it would please all my fellow commissioners, and I think we have to take a vote on this motion tonight. But my issue is cramming them all that tight to the top of the hill, and I do think that changes the character of the neighborhood for the other individuals that live there and many of the other lots in the greater neighborhood.
And on the question? No, we're discussing on the motion. All right, Commissioner Forrest.
I consider this part of the discussion of the motion because
I don't think it's appropriate.
Because of Commissioner Scher's comments about would have welcomed variances. I'm wondering, is it procedurally, if the applicant chose to withdraw this application, we've done this before at this point in the
Not in the middle
process.
of a motion.
Not with the motion on the
This
table.
is,
There's a
usually
motion on the
there has
table.
to be a motion before there's any discussion under Robert's rules. So
We
anyway,
have plenty of discussion without a motion.
I know, but procedurally, usually you have to have a motion before you can have discussion. So I'd like to know, does the applicant have other options, Planner Teague, and is that an appropriate thing to do in a situation like this, either to withdraw it or to come back with a variance tied to it?
I think they've indicated a willingness to move the houses up front. They were, they wanted to wait until they had a specific house plan before they came forward.
And because this is a recommendation to council, though, even if we go one way or the other, they could probably impose or procedurally do whatever they want to, too, right?
They'll have an option between
Right.
now and the council meeting to
Exactly.
take
That's
whatever
this is
action
what I
they
wanted
think
to
is
clarify.
appropriate.
Exactly. Okey-doke. Thanks.
Further discussion? All right, hearing none. Jackie, I'd ask you to call the roll. So the motion is to deny. So a vote in favor is a vote for denial.
Commissioner Scheer. Aye. Commissioner Schultz.
Aye.
Commissioner Fox.
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
No.
Commissioner Flatter.
Nay.
Commissioner Forrest.
Nay.
Commissioner Grable.
Nay.
Chair Staunton.
Nay. So the motion fails, and our practice at the Planning Commission is we do not do another motion. This is the recommendation that goes to the council, is that there was a motion to deny. That motion failed. As you all witnessed, there was plenty of back and forth as well as gathering of information, and so the recommendation will go forward on a failed vote to deny. So that concludes this matter. Thank you, all of you, for your presentations and your patience and staying with us for the evening. All right, the next item on the agenda is correspondence and petitions. You have in your packets copies of the council connection as well as our attendance log. Carrie, anything to expand upon on the council connection? I know there's an item coming back to us.
Yes, I don't believe that showed up in the summary of the council meeting, but you recall the subdivision at the intersection of Tracy and Hawks Lane?
Drive or
Hawks
Circular
Drive?
Lane or
Hawks.
something?
Yeah, the council, their initial consideration of that project was to deny that plat. As you recall, the Planning Commission recommended approval, I believe unanimously. The council had some issue with the shared driveway, and they authorized staff to draft some findings and come back and adopt a resolution for denial of that plat. During the discussion of that resolution, the council referred the project back to the Planning Commission. The applicant would like to come back and have one driveway out onto Hawks and one onto Tracy. So there would not be a shared drive. They'd utilize the existing driveway for one of the homes and then cut a new driveway off of Hawks.
So when do you anticipate we'll see that?
We anticipate they extended the 60-day rule, or extended it to, I believe it was mid-December. So their goal is right now they're revising the plans. They're going to meet with the neighbors. I believe we'll have a neighborhood opposition to the project as a result of putting the driveways onto Hawks. But it will likely be your second meeting in October where that would come before the commission.
All right.
Just one. If
Commissioner
I
Platter.
recall, there was no opposition to that one as
Correct.
originally came through, right? Okay.
So, Chair and Commission member comments. I have a couple of items. First, I want to welcome Commissioner Fisher back to our cozy family here. He is now almost 3.5 hours into his term as a planning commissioner. And for those who are still with us after having watched, Commissioner Fisher served 9 years, including 2 years as chair of the commission before leaving us last year. And when Commissioner Carpenter resigned, the council asked Commissioner Fisher to step in and finish out until next February. So we're happy to have him, and welcome Commissioner Fisher. The second item I wanted to share with folks who might still be watching is that we did have an opportunity in advance of our meeting tonight to have a work session where we talked about priorities for our Planning Commission work plan for 2014. It was a very constructive discussion, and staff is going to put together a draft of the work plan in light of that discussion and bring that to one of our next couple of meetings where we can kind of finalize a form of that we will then be bringing to the City Council to propose as our work plan for 2014. So thank you all for your work on that. Are there any other comments from members of the Commission? Commissioner Platter.
Just a comment, Commissioner Carr and I last week met at the first meeting for the Living Streets policy. What we went through at that time was primarily just how we're going to go with that. The plan right now is to meet monthly on that. The city staff will be preparing items for us to review as we go along. The task force or advisory committee is made up of folks from many of the other commissions as well, such as Energy, Environmental, Park Board, obviously Transportation, and some other ones. So the goal out of that is that we'll try to give you roughly monthly quick updates on where we're at, what we're seeing, and Commissioner Carr and I were talking through it. How do we start to adopt those things as we go through initially, so we're not necessarily waiting until it becomes something. How can we adopt these items now as we, hard to start to implement nuances to that as we go through. The City Council has approved the concept, so we do have that as a guideline at this point. So
thank you, Commissioner Platter. Commissioner Scheer.
A very minor item, but I think we need to look at our calculations for our attendance. We have some people at 106%. We have people at 100% who've missed meetings.
Mr. Potts and the
I'm
chair
thinking,
at 106%.
Yeah.
Must have been extra credit somewhere in there.
Just thinking we might want to take a look at that, Jackie.
It sure did. It sure did. Yeah.
You got a bad Excel spreadsheet.
Other comments? Commissioner Grable.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, without trying to sound rancorous or personal.
You never do.
I really believe that we need to think about the fact that sending a recommendation to the council that we agree not to deny something is an abdication of our responsibility. We're not here to agree not to deny something.
Well, so on that point, if I recall correctly, I was the one who wanted to keep making motions until we had a motion that passed, and the commission decided collectively that we weren't going to do that we were going to do one motion, and if it failed, then we weren't going to proceed. So substantively, I agree with you. I think we should make a motion until we make a motion pass. But we've made that decision. If we want to revisit that as a procedural matter, I'm happy to do that. So we can take that up perhaps at another time. Other comments from the commission members? All right, staff comments? Anything further to add, Carrie?
Just a reminder that we have a work session at our next meetings, September 25th, with the city attorney. That one will begin at 5:30, likely be in the mayor's conference room again. And then also, you had asked to have our new residential redevelopment coordinator.
Yes.
So we'll have her come to our meeting on October 9th
Very
and
good.
talk a little bit about what she's been doing.
Commissioner Fisher.
I'm sorry, but there are two things. One is, so we're going to have the city attorney come when there's actually no major issue of any high stress. I mean, have we ever, questioned or had him here when we have these it seems like issues like this, we're getting attorneys for everybody out there, and we're kind of sitting here going,
Well, the purpose of his visit, that's an issue we could take up with the city manager in terms of allocation of resources, but the purpose of his visit at our work session is really a long-standing request to get a session just training on overview on questions that recur for us as opposed to advice on particular applications. I'm sure that Carrie could make a recommendation about the city attorney attending our meetings on a regular basis, but I guess I'd leave that to staff to make a call on that. It sounds like you think it would be a good idea.
Well, there are times where it would be really helpful, and tonight was one of those, but not that there's a lot of brain power up here and attorneys who have a lot of experience, but it's a different role, so
Indeed.
it gets a little difficult. The other item I would just bring up is the issues tonight. The first issue about the 500-foot radius. Does that feel like something we should be bringing back? And I know we just had a work session where we talked about the goals for the next year, but this one seems kind of important if we're really focusing on the character. Or the 500-foot radius is fine as long as we get, maybe that's a question for our city attorney, are we okay landing on what we did about character overriding our 500-foot rule?
Yeah, that's an excellent topic. I think it's very timely for him. This is similar to a subdivision that the city denied about 8-9 years ago, and we were sued over and lost that lawsuit. So,
I think that one of the things I was going to say in preparation for Roger's session with us in a couple of weeks is, as I requested the last time we discussed this, if there are questions that we want him to be addressing, and I think this is one that will come up. So you can give him a heads up that we'd like to talk about and I would say even broader to the whole plat subdivision, what is our role? I mean, tonight, I think there was a question earlier this evening that said, is all we are going to do, I think Commissioner Forrest asked, is the only thing we have to look at is X, Y, Z. So I think we would benefit from a review of what role we play in subdivision approvals. And so that question, along with the others that have already been sent to him, would be a good one. And if folks think of other things in the next week or so, I strongly encourage you to send a note to Kerry. He'll send it along to Roger. Commissioner Platter, did you have something to add? Okay. Commissioner Potts.
Relative to Cindy Larson coming in before the commission, when we were going through the residential redevelopment, we heard from many citizens who did not feel like the city was being responsive to concerns they had with adjacent construction, which was part of bringing her on. I think it would be good to hear some very specific examples from her, if you could request that, of how she's dealt with things, whether there have been remedies, penalties, actions, or in fact, if she's been called out and it really has not been a material issue.
All right, very good. Thank you all. I know it was a long evening and good hard work. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.